This is the Logic Only Zone, and welcome to Logic Church, you guys. This week we're going to be speaking about the nature of reality. What is reality? We have a lot of topics on that. I'm super excited to get into this and talk about this stuff. We should have a lot of new, exciting guests today. Super excited to talk with them. Logic Church, you guys, is a weekly hangout on science, philosophy, psychology, sociology, self-help, truth, and life in general. And we do this every Sunday at 3 p.m. Pacific time, and that's California time, West Coast. So yeah, I'm here, you guys, and I'm ready to do this. I got myself some green tea and some mint tea, and I got some blueberry scones again today. So I'm going to be enjoying these and having some philosophy time with you guys. So super excited for this. And guys, link is in the description to join. So feel free to hop in the room with me. And I'm going to send out those invites and announcements right now. What's going on?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm excellent today. How are you?
Pretty good. I see it switched to my other profile now, so I don't know who I am when I get on here anymore.
You're the invisible man.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
I'm here. Just getting some tea.
Wow.
Hey.
That was weird.
What happened? Hear me? Yeah, I hear you.
It doubled me on both profiles.
Huh.
So I guess I'm both in here.
Both of you?
Yeah, both of me are in here.
Two of you?
Yeah, I just shut off another window. It must be feeding back through the other profile. That's weird.
Must be a modal realistic phenomenon.
Yeah, it's weird. I was messing with, well, I'm going off the landline, but earlier I couldn't get the camera to sync with the mic, and it was just a weird thing. Oh, what type of tea you got today?
Same, green tea.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I roll.
Yeah. I thought you'd mix it up a little bit.
Well, I didn't feel like coffee today. Coffee's, yeah.
Yeah. So
lately, tea has been working better than coffee for me. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of go back and forth from the two. Coffee, the only time I drink coffee normally is in the morning. Mm-hmm. And it's like the only time I can stomach it. You know, like any other time, it's just kind of like disgusting to me. But in the morning, for some reason, it's all right, you know.
Yeah.
And tea just kind of, I think I overdo it when I do the tea and that, you know, to where it's all sour, you know, and bitter, you know, how you get all the taste of the leaves and that and everything, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I tried to invite, well, I invited a few new people. I don't know if they're going to show or not because they got really crazy kind of schedules and stuff.
Yeah.
But one guy, his name's Peter J. Wax, and I met him on MySpace. We used to have we were part of a time travel collective group that worked out all these different like theoretical physics theories and stuff. And we were working on the idea of quantum foam, of the idea that you couldn't make a time machine because you couldn't generate enough energy to do that. But what you could do is take a very, very small like quantum foam black hole and pump energy into it and use that through use of nanites. So we were working with these, you know, just kicking out these ideas, and we had these other guys running mathematics. Well, he went on to write the book Second Paradigm, and he's got a bunch of cool stuff. He's got stuff like that. He's got a few vampire books, werewolf books, because that was a big thing when he started writing, right?
Yeah.
And he seemed pretty geeked about it, about coming on. I don't know if it's going to happen because he couldn't really give me a for sure, you know. But
yeah, I feel you. Yeah.
Yeah. So So who all else do you think we have coming in? I see Alex wanted to stop in, but he had to run.
Yeah, should be some interesting new folks. I've been kind of active in different communities and stuff like that this week. So
yeah,
some fresh blood to Logic Church.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So what do you got going in the other communities?
Just dropping by some different hangouts. True Sherm is doing this great late night hangout that he's doing Monday through Friday. People should check it out. Sherman
you know what? His hangouts start off right about the time I get up for work, where I'm at. So I might actually hit some of those. I don't know how together I'll be for that, but maybe if I get enough coffee, I can jump in there. You know. Yeah. That. Oh, did you see any of the stuff going on with the Sargon of Akkad petition?
No, I did not. Do you want to talk about that for a sec?
Yeah, if you don't mind. I mean, while we're waiting for people or whatever.
I have something interesting too. Once we finish that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, they had. There was this fiasco with A Voice for Men, which is a men's rights activist magazine. And it was with this woman named Willie Bumblebee. She goes by, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, I don't know all the details with that. You know, I mean, I know people have told me different things, but I don't know firsthand everything that happened. So I've kind of gotten along with both sides of that. And now on this Sargon of Akkad, this petition that he had, basically what he wants to do is it's not really banning anything and it's not censorship. But what it is they want to put like scientific scrutiny on some of the courses that are taught, you know, like if something's taught that's provably wrong, we want to have it removed or suspended from the curriculum, right?
Yeah.
Now we realize, you know, and Sargon realizes that this petition is just something to rally people together, you know, to make them aware of the problem, right?
Right.
It's not going to actually do a whole lot in the universities, but it will. It's like a starting point, right? To get people more aware of what's going on. And so anyway, this Willie Bumblebee and her husband jumped on in, and her husband was just going crazy on the hangout, right? And he was shouting over everybody and saying it's censorship. So a lot of people. Well, not a lot of people. Some people are afraid that this is censorship, that we're pushing for government censorship. And the idea is more of a due diligence, you know, trying to say, like, you know, if somebody's teaching you in class somewhere that 1 in 4 women are being raped, and all the statistics show that that's not true, then that should not be taught, you know. And people can question the statistics, you know, where they come from, how they arrive at them, all that other stuff. But it's just not right to, you know, the opinion of the people signing the petition. And
they can't, and they can't like ask every woman on the street.
Right.
I expect they're all going to be honest about what's happened to them in their life. So like, you know, it's.
It's a weird, it's a weird deal because it's like when somebody tells you the thing about like, well, most rapes aren't reported, and it's like, well, then how do you know anything about them? You know, I mean, how would you know that they actually happen? Right, and that's just one aspect. You know, it's kind of like if you go to a university and somebody's teaching flat Earth, right? It's like sure, you could probably, if you really believe in that. You could probably find someone who would teach that, and you could pay for that. But should the universities actually teach that? Should they be allowed to teach that without any scientific basis?
Right.
So then that brings up the issue of censorship. Is it censorship to question that, you know, to not allow that or to suspend it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so what do you got going?
So basically, so remember when we talked about black holes, we talked about how they found something that came out of a black hole, and how that basically throws this whole theory we have about black holes out the window. Mm-hmm. Well, I think Stephen Hawking agrees with that now. And I saw in the news Stephen Hawking started talking about theories related to what black holes actually are now, based on our knowledge that we've seen stuff come out of a black hole.
Right.
And so what they think is now black holes could be doorways to different universes. So it doesn't take a genius to come up with that hypothesis, but you know.
Well, I was studying the other day Hawking radiation, right, and how that works, and I had heard of it, but I didn't have a I'm sure I don't have a full understanding of it at this point. But the idea is that you have in these black holes. Now, we're not talking about supermassive black holes. We're talking about your, I guess you'd say, standard black holes, right? What happens is the energy, the mass, whatever goes into it, and for some reason the negative charges keep dropping into it, but the positive ones get rejected, like the protons and stuff get rejected. So around the black hole, on the outside of the black hole, you have a tremendous amount of proton energy, right? And so then you have to wonder, what are we talking about? Positrons and electrons or that kind of thing, because it's supposed to be a negative. When a particle goes in, it creates another particle that's equal and opposite. And it kicks out the positive one for some reason, where it takes in the negative one. But here's what I thought was really kind of cool about that. Okay, we know that theoretically, if you go into a black hole, time is slowing down once you go into the black hole, and time actually reaches a point where it stops, because there's no there's just no time inside there because of mass and everything's so dense, right? Well, as that happens, the outside universe is still going at its regular time. So if you could observe the universe as you're falling into a black hole, what you would see, if you could observe it, is time around you would be speeding up, and it would speed up until the end of the universe came, and there would be nothing left, right? Now, here's what's intriguing about this, especially with this thing that just shot out of the black hole. Okay, anything that's in the black hole, that falls in the black hole, will stay there until the universe around it is gone, right? So whatever shot out of that is something that existed before our universe existed. It's something from the far, far distant past. See what I'm saying? And that's where you get your doorway to the other universes. And this is like something from a distant past, right? That was shot, ejected into our universe. And so whatever that is, it's been in there long before our universe even existed. Isn't that weird? Isn't that a weird kind of paradox?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they say, but sounds, I mean, I don't know, like it's so weird for them to have a theory about something and then go with that for so long, and then
Well, are you a big Doctor Who fan?
No, I did watch a couple of episodes, mannequins chasing people.
Oh, okay.
I think that's the first one. So, I know that they supposedly gets better, but that kind of turned me off of it.
Yeah, Cybermen and all that other stuff. Well, they had there was an epic series of episodes that was leading up to the like a season finale kind of thing one time, right? And what they had done is they had taken all these doctors from different times, different series, and it was like every character that was like a spin-off character of Doctor Who, the Torchwood series, all that other stuff. They ended up in this episode, and leading up to that, there were these things that kind of look like the spheres from the movie Phantasm. I don't know if you remember Phantasm, but they had these spheres that you had souls inside of it, right? Well, what it was is that was what was left of the human race, and they had went insane. They're called the Toclafane, right? And they had went insane because they had existed after the universe was gone. So what happened is that human consciousness existed in these little robotic spheres, but they had nowhere to go because everything in the universe was gone. It had reached full entropy. Right? So they were just drifting in nowhere. So they went mad and this one doctor, the master, had pulled them from that point in time back into the past to fight Earth, right? And fight the other doctor. And it was a neat idea because it's kind of like the idea of this black hole thing. Like, okay, so Andromeda, the series Andromeda, kind of touched on that, but they were dealing with like super black holes, and the physics are a little different with that. In Andromeda, the protagonists were trapped in the event horizon, and for some reason time had slowed down for them, but they weren't totally pulled into the black hole. They at a later time had pulled out, and I don't know, it was like maybe 300 years later or something, they came back into time, right? But now imagine the idea of like just going into this black hole, if you could survive it, you know, going into it and then seeing everything in the universe, the whole universe just disappear.
Yeah,
right?
wow.
And then you come out into what? Into nothingness, or you come out into a new universe, like a new Big Bang, right? Which is, you know, a really strange concept, the way that works. But these, you know, my theories on time, I've never thought time is linear in the sense of an arrow or whatever. I think it's more like building blocks. Like you have to have pieces of time put together to support, like a scaffolding, right? And that would kind of support that, you know, that idea. I'm sure other people could say it more eloquently than myself, you know.
And I'm not even sure I believe in time.
Well, okay, you have time as an illusion of time. You have your time in your consciousness, right? And you know that your time in your consciousness can only go you can only perceive it as fast as your neurons can work, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you know that your time is not going to be the same as anybody else's time, right?
Right.
And then as you move through time, you actually slow down time around you, right?
Mm-hmm.
The faster you go, the more time slows down around you because you warp that space-time. Okay, so now everything has that effect, right? Because everything has a little bit of gravity. Okay, so you have all these different time fields, and but underneath all of it, what the thing is that people kind of argue is there any empiric time? Is there like and I would argue that there would have to be, because then how would anything happen, any type of motion, without time itself being a factor in that? You know what I'm saying? Like the Big Bang, like there's people that say, well, the Big Bang happened and there was no time before the Big Bang, and that's why everything happened in a space of a second or whatever, you know, all this stuff. And it's like, well, in order for it to happen, there had to be some type of movement which would require time, right? I mean, that's just maybe I'm looking at it the wrong way, but I'm sure there's people that could put a formula to it and say, no, you're wrong, you know, that kind of thing. But but yeah, that's
universe. Yeah, the universe is a complicated mechanism. So
well, you know, that's the thing. Like people, you'll hear people constantly debunk scientists, because they'll say like, well, wait a minute, you know, the universe is only so many billion years old, and you have this planet or this star or whatever in that galaxy or whatever, not universe, I should say galaxy. And you have the star in there that is like older than the universe, right? Or older than the galaxy. And then you can't explain it. Well, the thing is that you're looking through different slices of time, different time fields. So you're not necessarily going to get an accurate reading on the time of some of these stars. You know, you know, you figure it takes what, like 8.5 minutes or something for light from the sun to reach us, which you figure, even though we're that far away from it, that's one of the closest things to us, right? So we're looking at things and trying to establish within, you know, billions of years, whatever, how long they've been there. And I don't think anybody really has an accurate assessment of how old the galaxy or the universe as we know it is, you know. But that's you know, you really need the physicist and that fighting that out with the numbers and all that. But like as far as the theories and that, We do know we perceive time differently. So there is that perceived time. That's a part of it. And then there must be some empiric time for everything to happen. And then as matter, mass, whatever affects other mass, it's going to alter the time streams of whatever it comes in contact with. So yeah, so it is a complicated mechanism.
Yeah. Oh, I want to say, guys, if you want to join, the link is in the description. We're just chatting here. We haven't started the hangout really, so we're waiting for people to join in. So don't be shy, guys. Come on in. Just want to throw that out there.
Yeah.
And let me know in the chat if it's not working, guys. But looks like it's working.
Huh.
Got Quintica in here.
Yeah. Now I see I got, okay, I'm looking at my logo. I got my logo thing or my face in there, and I got the Quinteca name, but I didn't get the yellow one up, which it should have done. So that's why it was having that problem earlier. Yeah. So, so what else is going on? What's new?
So, yeah, applying for graduate schools, and I just finished my statement of purpose, which was a pain in the butt.
Oh, so how does that work?
So you have to write an essay on basically how you're going to fit into the school, what research you've done, what research you're planning to do, and you know you have to convince them to buy your research project and accept you as a student. So, so yeah, I'm doing research on syntax and the structure of sentences. I'm doing research on particles, which are markers for nouns that designate how the different words in the sentence relate to each other.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and then I'm doing, I did conjugation. This is all for Japanese.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, I'm working on different techniques for helping people learn more quickly, because Japanese has been like a super elitist thing where unless you have super genius level IQ and you can rotely memorize a bunch of words, or grammar points or whatever, then you can't learn. So I'm trying to come up with a logical, analytical method to it where you can like really file the information where it needs to go and really memorize where things are supposed to go and get used to it through exposure and stuff like that.
You mean like maybe some kind of chart where you have like your nouns on one side and your verbs or whatever on the other? And yeah,
really cool. Break it apart into like sections and really teach people how to interrelate, and basically you're building a structure in your mind of how you're going to put sentences together. So instead of having some grammar points you memorize and like, oh, I remember this grammar point, I can use to say this thing, you basically can say anything you want by interchanging parts that you learned. How they, you learned how they function and how it relates to English, and you can, put this part or that part there, and you know where everything goes, type of thing. And you practice it in a way that you get used to interchanging them, and then basically it's just like English. When we're speaking English, we're not thinking of what sentence we want to say or what type of grammar we want to use. We're thinking of words and trying to put something together, right? Right. So I'm trying to make it more like that. So when you're speaking Japanese, you're not going to be like thinking about it. You're just going to do it.
Right, more intuitive. I see.
Yeah, and it's better. So you're gonna, it's actual fluency. It's gonna lead people to actual fluency. It's not gonna be a thing where, like I said, you just memorize a bunch of words or grammar points. That's like impossible. If you can only do that if you're a super genius, honestly. So most people just give up on the language. Yeah,
tricky language, huh?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but so is English. So.
Yeah, well, English is always, what do they say, living language, right? It's always changing and adapting, and I guess we get that from the Vikings or whatever, how they were doing that, and, changing everything that they came in contact with, right?
Yeah.
Did you hear about the telomere experiment?
No, what is that?
Okay, well, do you know who Henrietta Lacks is? Have you ever heard of her?
No, but that is a pretty cool name.
Yeah, okay, well, here's what's weird. Okay, she's in essence, is the only immortal human being. And we used her her cells to cure polio. And what the story was, and I forget the years, so I'm kind of rusty on this, but we call it I think it's called the HeLa cell, or the HeLa gene. And what it is that she was dying of cancer. It is cancer. This was a black woman who was dying of cancer. She was a nurse, and a doctor had discovered that her telomeres in her cells, in her genes, whatever, were not shrinking. And every time that you reproduce a cell, you grow a new skin cell or organ cell or whatever, your telomeres get shorter. And eventually they get short to where you die of old age, and that's what causes aging, or a big part of what causes aging. Okay.
Oh.
See, so the idea is that they've saved her cells, and they've got several metric tons of her cells in like all of the civilized, first world countries and stuff like that, because they use it to cure different diseases. But actually what you're talking about is a woman's living cells that they just keep feeding and they never die, right? So in essence, some part of her is alive forever, as long as, you don't burn the cells or throw them out or whatever. Okay, so what they've been trying to do, a bunch of these life extension groups and scientists and that, is they've been trying to figure a way to make the telomeres where they don't shrink. Now, I had read part of an article. I've got to get the rest of it. But this was kind of a hush-hush thing where they took a woman who was, I think, in her 50s, and they had been giving her injections of these synthetically made telomeres, right? These cells. And now they've released results where she is reverse aging. So that's a weird thing, because now she's going to go from like 50 to like 30 to like 20 if if it's successful. And they're confident to where they're reporting that, yes, it's successful. I don't know how they measure exactly the age, how they reverse age or whatever. And I know that cancer is always a risk with that, because you're programming the cells to do something they're not meant to do.
Right.
So we'll see if they have side effects or whatever, but this could be the cure for immortality, to make a cure for mortality. But then could you imagine, okay, so you get these cells, right? And you're a few thousand years old or whatever, and let's say you're not bored with everything and you're happy with it, whatever. You'd have to worry about like everything even more than you normally would, like a truck or a car or whatever, because you wouldn't die naturally, right?
Right. So basically there'd be a class of people that don't die, and most people would die.
Exactly. And if you think of like, and if you think of the situation we're in with overpopulation, though the population's not exploding quite in the way that it was predicted, in the past there, it's still way too big, human population for the climate change stuff we have going on, and for progress in it. So providing we don't go to another planet or send up people to other planets or whatever, there is going to be this time, I think, where it's going to be like a culling, or people are going to starve to death or whatever, and you'll have this one elite class that will have these, and in theory, and they'll outlive
psychopaths that can't die. Oh my
right,
gosh.
right, and then there'll be, and you figure like how many of those will there be if they don't make it? Okay, like let's say right now they could give that to everyone. Let's say they could afford to do it, and they had enough of this stuff to do it. And if it was,
you know what?
I mean,
I really hope they don't do that. I mean,
well, it'd be a
there's
nightmare. Well, we'll see, because if they did that, then you would have no population die-off, except for people killing each other.
But do you think people could stop reproducing? Yeah, I don't think so.
You would have to, but I kind of think that, well, okay.
But we could get fixed, I guess.
Well, I think that probably a side effect of that will be that it'll change the reproduction cycle of humans. I don't know, because I haven't seen, they haven't done it long enough to get side effects, right?
Yeah.
So they have to measure all these side effects, and it could go really, really horrible,
Yeah,
I mean,
it probably will.
Yeah, it probably will. Yep.
Mess with nature.
Well, you got that other guy working with head transplants, right? And they're real close to doing a whole spinal head transplant. I forget that it was a French guy or something that's doing that. but they have to do it like in international waters on a ship and that, because nobody will allow it. But he's got some people financing him now, and he's got people donating their heads or their bodies to have this done. And I watched that. Well, I watched. It was one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen. I watched him do the head transplant from one monkey to another, and it was just like just brutal, you know, to watch. You know, and he could keep it alive and stuff like that, but not for long. You know. But now they have all these experts in that doing that, so they're working on just swapping out body parts and stuff. And you saw that modular human video, right? The one where the guy had the things that looked like pieces of cabbage and meat in it with the electrodes, and they hooked together and all that.
Oh yeah, that was absolutely disgusting. It was disgusting, but it's also, yeah, I can't believe that. That's just amazing. Yeah.
Well,
because here's the thing, like they've done a good job with reproducing human aesthetics with silicone and stuff like that. You can create an android that looks definitely like a human being. But the problem is they haven't quite worked out the way it's going to function, the actual body is going to function and stuff. Because I'm thinking like it would be really cool if androids actually had proper temperature as well. You know, like they could get warm, you know, for particular purposes, if, you know, temperature and stuff like that would be a positive thing.
Oh, well, you know, they'll have testers and stuff for that, but
yeah,
you know, that or people that'll say people that'll say it's too warm.
It's all like its heart is beating and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
But you know what was weird is that thing that we were looking at, that was alive. That was actual muscle tissue, and like that's just disturbing. That's because, you know,
these little limbs.
Yeah, and then the brain automatically, if you hook a limb to it, the brain automatically is like, oh, hey, I got a limb, and it start crawling. You know, there's no thought to it. It's like a very intuitive process, very basic.
Well, you know, but with that logic, it's like, oh, here's a knife. Oh, I have a knife.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Okay.
There was a movie like that years ago. It was like in the I have to say it was like early 70s. And the actor's name was Siegel. And I can't think of what the name of it was. I want to say Terminal Man, but it was something different. And what the idea was is he was having these seizures. So they put a chip in his brain to regulate these seizures. But what it was doing is it made him like a killing machine. You know, like he would get emotional of that, and he would do that. He'd just start stabbing people or whatever, and he wouldn't know he was doing it. It would just be like a machine. So this chip in his brain started taking over. It started like making everything a defense, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And well, there was another one like that. Vindicator, I think, was a movie where they made this kind of RoboCop character that if you came within 10 feet of it, it would just automatically try to kill you. Like it couldn't stop from doing it. But yeah, you have all that weird stuff going on, and that fascinates me. The idea of they've got this cybernetic system where you have an electrical system wrapped in human flesh. You know, kind of like the Terminator thing, right? And you just plug the things in together. You know, it's like how long before they make human centipedes and you know what I mean?
It's definitely interesting, and I want them to. I think it'll be really cool when they make actual human androids. I mean, heck, wouldn't that be so cool? Like just having an android here and like doing stuff for me. Like, oh, will you clean that up and put those things away for me and bring me a cup of tea? You know, I'm sitting here writing my paper, and you know, the android brings me over a cup of tea. Awesome.
Well, you'll probably have that in Japan.
I can't wait, to be honest with you.
I know a few people at well, I don't know that they've ever been out there, but they're like really, really into that culture, right? And they're artists. You know, they do a lot of the anime style kind of stuff, but they're like, oh man, I'd love to be there. And it looks to me like it's so crowded, but I guess it would be like if you were in New York, right? You know, you have so many people around you to where you could almost be invisible. You know, like just like if you were on a farm in the middle of nowhere, you know, there'd be nobody around you, so you'd be invisible. But if you were in a huge city, you'd be invisible too. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does look cool. I mean, it would be a great place to check out. I don't, you know, you would have to know, like, you know, the language, or you're studying the language, you'd have to know it just to get around, to get along, is what I'm thinking. I don't know. Do they speak, now in Japan, they don't, are there that many English speaking Japanese?
Well, you know, to say that Japanese people speak Japanese or English is kind of a fishy thing, because they don't. Pretty broken English. I met very few people that can actually speak English. Because the sentence structure in Japanese is totally upside down. I mean, it's totally backwards, and you know, it's just like with the problem with people who are learning Japanese that are foreigners. I mean, they just memorize words and grammar points, and then so you can't really have a conversation with them. You know, it doesn't really flow properly. So, yeah.
Yeah, I have, where I work, I have a Macedonian that works there. And I have a friend that's Croatian that I haven't talked to her in a while. I think she's been busy with her kid or something. But you see, like, similarities in some of the languages. So I kind of work on that. And I know only enough to say stuff like hi and goodbye and how are you and stuff like that. But they appreciate it, you know, because a lot of people, they don't put any work into that, right? A lot of English people, right? They're like, you just learned my language, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, but Russian looks like it wouldn't be too bad. German looks like it wouldn't be too bad. But there's a lot of languages that'd be really, really tough to pick up, I think.
Yeah, definitely. For sure. So guys, I don't know if anybody's having trouble getting into the Hangout. Please let me know in the chat. There's a fair number of people watching now, so I'm sort of expecting people to join in at any time. I know Ozymandias Ramses II is watching, and he will be awesome in this Hangout, I think. We're going to be talking about presuppositional arguments. So, yeah, definitely look forward to him joining if he would like. And, yeah, guys, just let me know if the link's not working, because that might be why people aren't joining.
I'm going to check Twitter and see if anybody got anything on that, because I sent some stuff out. But see, what usually happens is when I send out notifications, I get stuck right like the minute before I'm coming on, and everybody wants a link in that. And so I try to tell them early, and then I don't know if they lose track of it or what. But I was talking to Rizzle the other day, and he was saying he was stopping in.
Oh, yeah. I should definitely send some links. I forgot Skype. I'm going to do that right now.
Oh, okay. My Skype, for some reason, doesn't work with my computer. And I don't know what that is with Google, and they like fight each other, the two programs. So I do have it on my phone, but then my phone, that's another nightmare. The programs on that, you know.
Yeah, I feel you.
Yeah.
Phones. Okay, here we go. I'm going to be sending out some more links to peeps.
Yeah, where's your posse, man? Where's David Weston and Lisa and Cody Skillen?
Yeah, man, these guys, I don't know what's going on with them. Everybody knows Sunday.
Right.
It's time for Logic Church.
Well, you know, I don't know. We got like beautiful weather out here in Michigan today.
Yeah. And
I imagine a lot of people are probably on a boat or whatever. They're probably like losing track of wherever they're at, you know, if they're outside, right? I don't know what it's like in the rest of the country, but here.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day today. Yeah. So Alicia wants to join. I sent you an invite, Alicia. I'm going to try your other one as well. I saw a couple of your accounts.
Now, I sent her the link on Twitter, but I don't know that she got it. And that wasn't that long ago.
Okay.
She might, is she in your circles?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah, she was in a few of the other hangs that I did. Oh, who do we got here? Oh, that's Ozymandias.
Oh, hey. How's it going? Did the link work? He'll tell us in a minute.
Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yeah. Did the link work?
It did, but something went wrong. Something is kind of glitchy, and my camera's not working. So I'm just gonna pop out and pop right back in. All right.
Okie dokie. All right.
Thanks for the invite.
I wonder if that's what was going on with mine earlier. I couldn't sync the sound in the picture. I was trying to make videos and it just wouldn't work. I don't know why. It'll probably work perfect tomorrow, you know.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for watching and for being patient. We're working on getting stuff going. Feel free to pop in the Hangout and join you guys. There's plenty of room. Plenty of room for logic.
Yeah. Now I see Dean just posted. Maybe we can get Dean in here. Whoop. Ah, there we go.
Was it me?
Oh no, I'm just sending a link out there.
Okay.
It sucks. I have like really I'm really farsighted. So I have all these junk glasses because no two pair of glasses are set the same. So I got like a pair that's really good for reading off the screen here, but it's terrible for reading Twitter. So so I'm making do with it. Let's see.
So guys, what else is going down?
Yeah. So well, we could start on.
Yeah. Go ahead. Tell me what you do to stay healthy.
Oh, okay. What do I do?
That's our icebreaker conversation.
Okay. Well, I've always been hyperactive, right? And I'm one of those people that I just run till I crash into the wall and I crash out, right? In keto diet, Boda says. And okay, so like I think my thing is like when I get up in the morning, I don't necessarily lead a healthy life in that respect where I take care of myself, like you know what I'm saying, like eating all the right things and all that. But I don't have I don't have anything against vegetables or anything like that, right? But I just keep running. It's like when I get up, I push myself. And when I come in, I'm one of those people that's really passive-aggressive about saying hi to everybody, right? Like everybody's kind of dragging in the morning. They're like, whatever. And I'm like, hey, you know, I'm here to get stuff done. And then I'm crawling out of there at the end of the day, right? But you got to have someone like that. You got to have all kinds, right? You got to have the guy that's really kind of pessimistic and you know, leaned back or whatever. And then you got to have the other guy that's optimistic and that. So I guess a lot of times I'm that guy, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is I try to keep in motion when I'm out, and where I fail is once I get in, I just boom hit the wall. Which I should actually start working out and start walking around the park and stuff again like I used to.
Yeah.
And I'll probably be quitting these again for another month and whatever all that. That's what I do is I binge on stuff like that, you know, alcohol or whatever for like a month or whatever. Then I'll quit it for like a month, right? Like cold turkey altogether. But it seems to work with me to an extent. You know what I mean? Where I think I'm above average with the people that I hang with. You know, like, but I'm not up to par. You know what I mean? I still got to work on things. You know, how about you?
I try to treat myself a little bit like I'm having these scones, but I try to make sure I get plenty of vitamins and protein, and I do a lot of running and push-ups and stuff. So push-ups. Yeah. Hey Floyd, what's going on, man?
Hey guys.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, so we're doing a bit of an icebreaker. Do you want to share anything you do to stay healthy?
Stay healthy? Well, I try to exercise and eat right, but you know, I'm not too good at that. But I try my best. But you know, I just try to follow what all the medical experts say. You know, good diet and exercise. Although sometimes I'm too lazy, or you know, indulge a little too much in desserts or whatever, like a lot of people.
Yeah, like my scones here or whatever. But cool, right on. And yeah, guys, I'm super into running. I really like running. I think it's really good for you.
See, I'm not a real big runner, but I can walk for miles and miles. I have nothing against walking. What's funny is I have a lot of friends who are physically, they look a lot healthier than I am, right? They can lift a lot more, whatever they're cut, whatever. But they're really heavy smokers, right? And like we'll start walking somewhere, and you know, after like a few blocks or whatever, they're trying to catch their breath, and I'm like, what's going on? You know, are you all right? You know, that kind of thing. But I've always done a lot of walking, so I think that does help. Running, I don't know if that would be probably bad for my joints and stuff. I know there's doctors that'll say that running is a good thing, and there's doctors that'll tell you no, don't do that kind of thing. You know,
don't run. Running's bad for you. Don't run.
Right, but I do know. I do know a doctor, a Pakistani doctor here that he kind of looks like Gandhi, whatever, you know, and like he runs like a fiend, right? And he's like a real thin, you know, small guy, whatever, but he's in perfect health. So it must be doing something for him, you know, and he knows what he's doing, you know, a doctor and all that.
Right. Oh, and I can see. Definitely, if you run too much, it's going to be hard on your body.
Right.
So,
right.
I mean, you know, it's got to be. You can't overdo it, but you know, it does so much. Here's the thing: like running does a lot for your cardiovascular system and your heart and your lungs and stuff like that. And I think the place where it's bad is like you could really seriously damage your legs, like your muscles and your bone and stuff like that if you're pushing yourself too much or you're like running uphill all the time or something. So, you know, you have to be kind of careful about it. Yeah. But anyway, what's up? How's it going?
How you doing, Ozzy?
Good, thanks. Sorry for that.
Yeah, so Ozzy...
I had to reboot my computer, actually.
So we were just kind of doing some icebreakers. What do you do to stay healthy?
Well, I heard some mention of running. I jog, not so much in the winter because I live in a snowy, hilly place. It's rather treacherous to run outdoors in winter. So I tried this winter to run on an indoor track. I didn't do it very consistently, and I haven't been doing it much in the last month. So I run. I do quite a bit of outdoor stuff. I'm kind of an outdoorsy guy. I love hiking and camping. In fact, I was out hiking today. I still stink of wood smoke because I had lunch over a campfire today. And I work out at home. You know, pull-ups, chin-ups, you know, push-ups, sit-ups, a little bit of work with free weights and stuff like that.
Cool. Right on. Yeah, I have a couple of weights I use and I do some stuff, but nothing too extreme. But yeah, cool. Right on. I think we can just jump in because I think we have enough heads here to talk about presupposition of argument discussion, the problem with reasoning based on presuppositions. So I saw you did a video on this, Ramses, and yeah, I mean it's a bad thing to have assumptions, and if you're going to make an argument or have something to say about something like religion or whatever it is, then you know, you have to be aware that there are particular presuppositions you have with your argument when you're making different types of arguments. So I saw a video you made. I think you were addressing this in terms of making religious arguments. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. Oh, Floyd, did you have something you want to?
Yeah, I was just say I think you can't help but to have presuppositions. I don't think there's any way to avoid that. But I think you can have a healthy attitude towards it, where you don't have to necessarily take them dogmatically. But I think some presuppositions you simply just can't avoid, and I don't think there's any way to kind of reason around them.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I'm of the same view. Everyone has presuppositions. Now, presupposition is just something that you take for granted, something you assume to be true. And now it can be something that you assume to be true upon reflection, that you don't know how to justify, but upon reflection you realize that you do assume it to be true, and so you consciously are aware that it's a presupposition. And then there are implicit presuppositions. kinds of things that you presuppose that you're not even aware of. It's never even occurred to you that you were assuming something or taking something for granted, right? The latter, I think, are problematic because, of course, when you take something for granted, you're not aware of it. You can't critically examine it. It might be a presupposition that could be demonstrated to be false, right? So it's important to be aware of one's presuppositions because to the extent that everything rests on what you presuppose, you could be erecting a mental picture of reality that by your own lights could be demonstrated to be false, right? And so it's important that we try to articulate these things. Part of the task of philosophy, actually, and critical self-inquiry is mining your belief set, sifting through your belief set, not only to find inconsistencies and working out the implications of your views, but also to suss out those things that you take for granted, those presuppositions, right? And then once you've done that, you can come to some decisions about that. You can say, well, this presupposition that I hold doesn't make any sense. It's false. I can demonstrate it to be false. Or I might have a presupposition that I can't demonstrate to be false, but I might recognize that it's inconsistent with something else that I believe to be true. So then I know that something's got to give. I might not know which one's got to give, but I know something's got to give. Right? Or I might realize that I have a presupposition that is irrational, but is so irrational in the sense that it violates some other norm of reasoning that I value or something like that, and then I have to get rid of it, and I know just on that basis it's got to go. But then there are like other presuppositions that I think are they're sometimes called properly basic beliefs. These are things that you can't justify, but nobody knows how to get on without them, and everyone seems to make these assumptions. And these would be things like our confidence in logic, our belief that our senses are reliable, that the natural world will sort of tick along in the future as it has in the past, that the future will resemble the past, the uniformity of nature, for instance, that I have a mind, that there exist causes and effects, and so forth. These are things these are categories of thought almost that we bring to experience, right? These are the things that go up to make up what we call rationality and reasonableness. And if you don't believe those things, then you're not going to be a reasonable person. Those are the things out of which rationality is constituted. But the thing is, and this is kind of troublesome to some people, but it really shouldn't be, but it is troublesome to some people, those properly basic beliefs, the very articles that go in, that are the ingredients in rationality, are not themselves justifiable, right? We don't know how to justify them without arguing in a circle, right? Like, for instance, deduction, right? How would you justify modus ponens, the principle of logic, an inference rule that says A implies B, A therefore B? How would you justify that? What the hell would you use, right? There's nothing in experience, there's nothing in logic that you could use. If you try to use logic to defend it, you'd just be arguing in a circle. Well, we all know the value of arguing in a circle, right? It's worthless, right? Same thing with the problem of induction, right? The use of induction, of generalizing from experience. There are difficulties in justifying induction, as Hume famously pointed out. So we have, all of us, I think, commitments, metaphysical commitments, just things that we have assumed. Some of these, I think, are just part of our animal nature, like trusting in the reliability of my senses. I wasn't taught that. I didn't learn that. I come equipped that way, the same way a cat does, right? This is just how we are. This is just, we get it for free. It's just part of our mental makeup. Just part of our brains does that. We just trust our senses. And even though we know sometimes they betray us, like in the case of illusions or just optical failures and things like that, our memory, I trust my memory, right? I can't test whether or not my memory is reliable because I have to assume my memory is reliable while I'm testing my memory. I have to assume that generally speaking, my memory is not, completely out of whack, that it's generally reliable, so that I can to test your memory, you'd have to sort of remember what you set out to test. You'd have to remember what the conditions were and what would constitute passing or failing the test. I mean, your memory is employed second by second in the act of evaluating the reliability of your memory, right? So we find ourselves, all of us, in this predicament of having things that we are committed to, that we believe, that we can't justify, except on pain of circularity. And these things, these properly basic beliefs, these are a special set of beliefs. These, I think, they're universal. We don't learn them. I think they're innate. They're not acquired. You don't have to teach anybody these things, typically. And we don't know how to justify them. But the use of them is what goes into what we call science, critical thinking, reasoning, right? Everything that we value as thinking the right way is made out of these things. And
So
we
it,
have no grounds for jettisoning them, for rejecting them. So we don't know how to falsify them. We don't know how to, we don't have evidence for them. So they are, strictly speaking, not rational. They are pre-rational, so to speak, right?
so what it sounds like you're getting to is that in terms of our bodies, how they work, what we think about, the way we converse with each other, we're always relying on supposing things are working, and also that we can't make an argument or have a conversation without there being things that we're supposing are already true or are functioning properly and things like that.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
to
yeah.
have this conversation, you have to presuppose, like, in order to have this conversation with you, I have to
Mhm.
presuppose that I exist and that I have a mind, that
Yeah.
you exist independently of my mind, and that you have a mind, that the words coming out of your mouth, that this is acoustic blast emanating from you a moment ago, wasn't just a noise, but that those were attempts at communication. So I don't just posit another mind over there on the other side of the world, wherever you are. I am positing that you have specific thoughts and intentions, and it was your intention to communicate specific thoughts, that you were using words. I have to assume that I am correctly remembering the start of your sentence by the time you get to the end of the sentence. So I'm assuming just a ton of things. I'm assuming tons of things about myself, you, the world, language, all of this. So even to ask a question, how do you know that? Presupposes that I can understand the question. To ask that question is to presuppose that the other person understands the question, right?
So does this ultimately lead to that we just have to presuppose? Is that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone does presuppose, and we presuppose tons of stuff, moment by moment, constantly, right? Now, the worry that some people have is this: if you say, "Oh yeah, okay, well you're granting that we just take things on faith," right? A lot of these things just have to be taken on faith. That somehow this is a license to believe anything on faith, and that's not true. That's why we make this distinction between beliefs. When beliefs is just whatever you take to be true, anything that you think is true, that's a belief, right? And then there are what are called basic beliefs, and a basic belief is a belief that is sort of fundamental to your overall picture, right? And then there are properly basic beliefs, beliefs that are not just present in this person's worldview and fundamental to this person's worldview, but properly basic in the sense that they're fundamental to everybody's worldview. And so the properly basic ones are sort of a smaller set of basic beliefs. So, for instance, a belief in God might be basic to a person's view. If you're a Christian, your belief in God conditions your values, it conditions your morals, it conditions your sense of meaning and purpose in life. It's going to dictate how you're going to live that day, how you're going to interact, how you're going to treat people, how you're going to regard yourself, how you're going to feel about things, how you're going to respond to events around you. So your belief in God and the specific beliefs that you have about God, right? That might be very basic in the sense that it's at the very center of your network of beliefs, your web of beliefs, right? It might be very, very fundamental. It might touch on a lot of things, but it isn't properly basic in the sense that you can get by in the world without that. Lots of people do. So just because something is basic and fundamental to your worldview or your picture of reality doesn't mean it's properly basic. Properly basic beliefs, I would insist. The reason we introduced the word properly there is that it's not arbitrary. You couldn't just pluck it out and be done with it, right? I mean, if you just pluck out a belief in induction, if you pluck out a person's belief in other minds, if you pluck out their belief in induction, deduction, if they imagine a person who just didn't trust his or her memories or something at all, right? I mean, these people wouldn't function, right? We would deem them mad or somehow completely deranged, right? So it's fundamental to rationality itself that you hold certain things. So those are the ones that I deem as properly basic. They are ingredients in rationality. They're constitutive of rationality, and they're not arbitrary. Now the thing is, though, a lot of people will be tempted to say, well, if they're that fundamental, they're necessary, right? Well, here's the interesting thing, though. You can deny them. I mean, it just might be false, right? The uniformity of nature might be false. Tomorrow, everything could change, right? For all we know, everything's going to go haywire tomorrow, right? Or maybe I'm a brain in a vat, and nothing that's going on around me is correct, and I really can't trust my senses. Maybe I'm in the Matrix. This is all being fed to me. I am, in fact, a galaxy-sized ball of glowing plasma in space, right? Maybe that's the reality of what I am, and I'm just hallucinating right now that I am this, earthly critter, right? On this ball, orbiting the sun. Maybe I'm nothing of the sort, right? In which case, all my senses are deceiving me. It is possible to deny these properly basic beliefs, right? They are not necessary truths. They're not self-evident. They're not undeniable, right? But what they are, so they're not inerrant, right? But what they are is irrevisable. We can't revise them. We don't know how to reject them. We don't know how to sort of say, I'm going to get this out of my belief set. Because as soon as you do, rationality falls apart, right? So that's what makes them properly basic. That's what's sort of special about them. So yeah, I think that we have presuppositions, and everyone has them, but not all presuppositions are created equal, right? Some presuppositions are fatuous. Some of them are completely dispensable. You can deny certain presuppositions. I think you can deny the existence of God, for instance. You can deny certain other things that certain people take to be absolutely basic and fundamental to their worldview. So it's not a license. So to grant that people have presuppositions and that we all have them is not a license to believe any old damn thing, right? That's the mistake that people make. A lot of people are worried about admitting, skeptics especially, have a tendency to be reluctant to admit that we have presuppositions because they think that if they do that, they're handing a license to other people to believe any old damn thing, and next thing you know, you got people spouting all kinds of woo and archaic superstitions and stuff like that, and they feel they're divesting themselves of the only weapon they have.
Okay, so that makes sense. And then, but how about suppositions? Like in terms of religion, religion for a lot of people can be a really healthy thing in terms of people feeling like they have a sense of belonging or that they're not alone or something like that. So that presupposition can have positive aspects, although socially it could also have negative. But so I hear you saying that people don't have a right to presuppose things that are not part of a logical framework. That's essentially what I'm hearing.
Well, I wouldn't say logical, but I would say
you used a particular term. I didn't pick
rationality.
That's a subset of suppositions that are acceptable. I forgot what term you used.
Properly basic.
Properly basic. Yeah. So religion's not properly basic then, and so what do we do with that then? Because it can have a positive thing for this person, for their health, their mental health, but it's not necessarily true. So do you see what I'm saying? It's kind of a difficult situation.
Yeah, it's not difficult to me. I mean, I'm not troubled by the fact that a belief is false but useful to a person. If a person has beliefs and they're useful to them in their lives, okay, and they're harmless but false, I'm not going to go out of my way to disabuse them of them, right? I will, if it comes up in the discussion, I'll point out, yeah, I think that belief is false, and I know it does you some good, and and it's not doing you any harm, but still it's false. And to the extent that I think the other person values having true beliefs, I will try to convince them that, well, maybe you could just disabuse yourself of that, right?
Yeah.
But then there are some beliefs that might do an individual a lot of good, but in fact might be also doing them a lot of harm in other ways, and might be harming other people, right? But my view is this: beliefs are about what is true, right? That's what it is to have a belief. A belief is that which you think is the case, what you think is true, nothing more, nothing less, nothing more. It's just that, okay? It's a doxastic attitude. It's an attitude towards a proposition. The cat is on the mat. I can want that the cat is on the mat. I can fear that the cat is on the mat. I can hope that the cat is on the mat. I can also believe that the cat is on the mat. It's an attitude that I can have towards the proposition. The cat is on the mat. Now, if you're in the business of having beliefs, you're in the business of being concerned about the truth. So if a person has beliefs that, by my lights, are false, even if they're not doing any harm, and even if they're doing them some good, right, like psychological good or something like that, or social good, I still think that's a reason not to believe it, because beliefs aren't about what makes you feel good. Beliefs are about what you think is true, right? We value the truth because we think it will do good things for us. We think that if you walk around with a lot of true beliefs, it will help. If you walk around with an accurate map of reality, right, you're gonna succeed better in life than if you walk around with a completely inaccurate map, bumping into walls and walking off of cliffs and stuff like that, right? Or walking around in circles, not getting to where you want to go. So I think of beliefs as like having a map of reality. There's the map and the territory, right? There's the facts, the states of affairs, and then there's the beliefs, right? I
have another possibility. I went through a little bit of depression when I found out that scientists are saying that the universe is slowly burning out, and so literally, some NASA scientist was saying the whole universe is burning out slowly, and everything is going to cease to exist. And so that may be something that's factual in reality, but it's something that could cause somebody a lot of negative harm. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what do we do with the idea like that?
Yeah. Well, I think you just suck it up.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're to be concerned about sort of something being psychologically damaging, we all have to sort of conspire to deny death and pretend that death doesn't happen at all. There's no such thing as death. Well, what could be more life-affecting and demoralizing than the prospect that, oh, I'm going to die? There comes a point in your life where life is so crappy, where you're so old and so decrepit, and you've seen so many loved ones die, and so much joy has been sucked out of your life by the ravages of old age that you can welcome death, right? But when you're 25 years old, the prospect of your death is not a happy thing.
Definitely.
And I don't know when I became aware of death as a child, but at some point I became aware of it, and it was disturbing to me. And I think one of the reasons why so many religions have in common the idea that death is an illusion, or that an exception is going to be made for you when it comes to death, is because it is comforting.
And any big change kind of like that will be disturbing, right? Like,
what's that?
Any big change like that in your thinking is going to be disturbing, whether it's the universe is going to burn out at someday, or you're going to die someday.
Yeah.
Any big shift like that's going to kind of be disturbing for a little bit.
Yeah. But I mean, I think some things are going to be disturbing forever. I mean, the prospect of your own mortality is going to be disturbing. The prospect of your own decrepitude. I mean, just look at really, really old people who are really, barely shuffling through life and just played with one health problem after another, and they know that it's never going to get better. It only gets worse, right? With time, it only gets worse, right? That is a demoralizing thought. That is an unhappy thought, right? But them's the facts, and I think we just have to confront them. And I think confronting them ultimately actually prepares us for them and ameliorates what is to come, right? And I don't think that sort of walking around with comforting illusions is a good strategy. I mean, there will be circumstances where I will let a person be deluded. I mean, if someone I love is on his or her deathbed and is in the grips of all kinds of comforting delusions about life after death and paradise and stuff like that, now is not the time for me to disabuse them of that, right? Because no good will come of them. I mean, all that's going to happen is they're going to go through some horror if I were to convince them, right? And they won't come out the other side and see that it's not so bad, right? So we can't be cavalier about the truth because it can hurt people. But
yeah,
I think as a policy, we don't want to adopt a policy that if something is going to be hard to live with and actually sap some of the joy out of life, that we shouldn't talk about it, or we shouldn't admit it to ourselves, or we shouldn't communicate that to other people. I think that's a bad policy. I think, well, first of all, you're deciding on behalf of other people what's good for them, and but you're doing it in bad faith. You're assuming that they won't be able to handle it, and when in fact many people can handle it. So it would be rare circumstances where I would let a person comfortably abide in his or her delusions, right?
Okay. What about presuppositions like, for example, psychopaths presuppose that their value is above other people's value. But I think that's sort of like a natural presupposition that they have innately in their consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
Well, a lot gets said about psychopaths and how their minds work, and I don't know that we actually understand what goes on in so-called psychopathy and whether or not they just value themselves over everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is it just a failure of empathy and compassion or something like that? Is there some mental module that's missing in them that most of us have that they don't have that puts them at a kind of emotional disadvantage, but that at the same time allows them to be more Machiavellian? I don't know actually how psychopathy works, but let's assume it does work that way. So what specifically is the question about them?
Yeah, how do we deal with people that are really super ingrained in a presupposition about reality and how they relate to other people and stuff like that? It doesn't necessarily have to be that, but how do we deal with helping people out that have this big problem of living with these presuppositions that are harmful for other people?
Oh, well, yeah. I don't know. I mean, to the extent that it rests on an emotional capacity that they lack, there's really nothing you can do. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, to the extent that they are simply lacking in a capacity for compassion, a capacity for empathy that is innate and cultivated to different levels in some people, but they just don't have the capacity, or they have very little capacity. There's not much you can do, right?
Right. Yeah.
I mean. Supposing a person, what's that?
You can look at like colorblind, and I'm colorblind to red and green.
Right.
You can't ever convince me to see red or green. You might get some kind of technological glasses and some technology and let me see versions of it, but you can't. There's no way you're ever going to be able to convince me to see it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, you can't be talked into having an experience that rests on having sort of a neurological capacity when you don't have that neurological capacity. So yeah, the colorblindness is a good example. You know, Xbox never going to be talked into experiencing green, but he can be talked into an appreciation for the fact that there is such a thing as the color green, right, that he doesn't experience and that others do, and that it is of value. So you can do that. But I mean, in the case of I was a little puzzled at first why you were asking about this question about psychopathy in connection with presupposition, but I see it now, right? So we presuppose the value of other people, and that other people have a certain value that's comparable to us, even though it might be hard to make yourself value another person as much as yourself. Rationally speaking, you can appreciate the fact that the guy over there likes his life as much as I like mine, so maybe I should, and I have no principled reason to treat him worse than I would treat myself. So why do I treat him less less well than I treat myself, right?
Right. Yeah.
But I think that when it's put that way, even a psychopath can see that actually it doesn't make a lot of rational sense to sort of treat yourself like you're better than someone else, just because you're you. Right, because that argument works both ways. Well, yeah, he's him, and he's
right. Exactly.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, rationally, it's kind of an interesting thing about egalitarianism. Some people have a hard time understanding, like, how do you justify egalitarianism? The idea that other people matter. That's what I mean by egalitarianism. That other people matter at all, right? Well, why do you matter at all? Well, it's because you matter to yourself.
Yeah.
That's why every organism matters to itself. Organisms that evolved that didn't care about themselves wouldn't stick around very long. They wouldn't care about themselves. They wouldn't care if they went hungry. They wouldn't care if they lived or died. They wouldn't care if they got injured. They'd just get rubbed out, because they'd be indifferent to their own well-being. But organisms are not indifferent to their own well-being. Organisms can't stick around and propagate and become a species. You can't get a species unless there's a system that is concerned with its own well-being. That's why I think every organism is concerned about its well-being, and the degree to which they can be concerned depends on how much brain they have. We have a lot of brain, so we can be very concerned about our well-being. And so, why should anyone be concerned about my well-being? Well, why am I concerned about my well-being? Well, the reason I have for being concerned about my well-being is the other guy's reason for being concerned about his well-being. It's just so obvious as not to have to be stated. But I think when you make it explicit like that, you realize, well, wait a minute now. There's nothing special about me. I'm not special in that respect, right? I have no reason to value me more than him, right?
Right.
I'm in a better position to figure out what is in service of my well-being. I know me better than anybody knows me. And so I'm the best possible person to look after myself, which is why I ought to be autonomous. But that's the reason applies to the other person too, which is why you ought to respect his autonomy. So it doesn't even have to do with reciprocity. You scratch your, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine, or anything like that. It's just that there's simply no reason to prefer yourself to another person. Yes, you do prefer yourself, but there's no rational reason to value yourself over another person, right? We really are sort of all equal in terms of our own value to ourselves, right? And that's why I think, in my view, that's why I think it's okay to let people kill themselves when they, by their lights, come to a rational conclusion, if they come to a rational conclusion, to terminate their lives. I think there comes a point in your life where you can say, life is so bad, it's of no value to me. And now it's none of your business, because it's up to me to make that decision. As long as there's nothing wrong with my brain, and it's not just some temporary succumbing to emotion or something, as long as it's well considered and stuff like that, I should be able to just sort of, kill myself.
Yeah.
And I have to grant that to another person. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Ozzy. Does anybody want to add anything or comment on that? On anything that was said? My life has changed.
Oh dear.
So many good ideas.
What, you had a paradigm shift?
Yeah, I'm suffering enlightenment over here.
On the issue of psychopaths and presuppositional values, I guess. I know it's a fictional example, but like you look at like the Red Dragon, right? The book The Red Dragon, the characters, Hannibal, all that. Okay, well the Will Graham is supposed to be a pro-social psychopath, which he's actually supposed to be a psychopath, but he acts in the interest of other people because there's really no reason. The way it's written or whatever, there's no reason for him to not act in their interest, right? So there's like an arbitrary choice from where he's coming from. Now he still has a wife and he has a kid in there, right? But there is a coldness in his character. But I think because he depends on society, societal systems, other people, to act within the law, so that his kid and his wife and all that can be protected, and that he can live in a world that's cohesive, that's good. He acts out of a amoral decision, right, to be a pro-social psychopath. And if you look at it like he's coming from, say, an amoral position, he could easily go the other way, right? But it just doesn't make sense because, whether a person's a psychopath or not, if you are not a psychopath, okay, you're going to have the empathy, right, and you're going to feel for other people and all that. If you're a psychopath, maybe you don't feel that, but you don't really have a reason to do bad to them anyways, right? You know what I mean? So you could still have a value like an egalitarian or equal value for everyone. And be a psychopath, but at the same time, it's like if it comes down to it, if it's your ass or theirs, they're probably going to turn you out. You know what I'm saying?
But it usually takes other mental disorders on top of it to become like the serial killer type psychopath that usually people picture, and cat torturing.
Yeah.
Right. You don't have to be a psychopath to value yourself and put yourself above others and screw people over, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It's not psychopathy that causes that in sort of the popular imagination. I don't know anything about the actual, psychology of psychopathy, but I mean, in the popular imagination, you see, TV shows like Dexter and stuff like that.
Right.
What you have there is someone that lacks certain emotional capacities and certain pro-social instincts and certain pro-social emotions,
Mhm.
and he has to learn them. And in his case, he's doing it purely instrumentally. He wants to get by in the world, right? And so he acquires this code
Right.
of conduct that he quite coldly embraces,
Mhm.
purely out of sort of pragmatic necessity. I don't want to end up in jail, you know. So this is what I got to do. I got to pretend like I actually value other people and that they care to me, but and that they care to me. No, that I care about them is what I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
But I don't know that it's like that at all for in the real case of psychopaths. But I think that in the case of sort of these pro-social emotions and pro-social instincts, we also have antisocial instincts and antisocial emotions, right? You know, selfishness and xenophobia and
Mhm.
all of this stuff, you know. And we come with both of these. You can't just count on human nature, you know, and assume that everyone will just, you know, behave with altruism and compassion and reciprocity. I think that what we do is, as part of civilizing a child, you know, child rearing, what you do is you try to suppress the antisocial emotions and instincts, and you try to cultivate and nurture pro-social and instincts and emotions. That's part of what we're doing, right? And so psychopaths might not be totally lacking in these capacities. It just might be that their capacity to develop certain ways of feeling towards other people might be stunted, right?
Right.
And so it could be something like that, assuming that it has anything to do with that. I really, again, I don't know anything about psychopathy.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That is a good point, though. Anybody has the capacity to be selfish and put themselves above others. Good point. Anything else, you guys, on this topic? Any last stuff?
Maybe we should move to the next one.
Yeah. All right. Onward we go. And away we go. Okay. So the source of life, will to create versus created through natural forces. Okay. What I mean by this is that I'm agnostic, and the reason why I'm agnostic is because when I look at nature and I see ecosystems, I see things in the ecosystems, different life forms, bacteria, predators, herbivores, all kinds of different creatures, everything is working together in harmony. And I see that all these forces are working together, and through their equilibrium and balance and motivation towards growth, life in the ecosystem can continue to live. And I see this as unnecessary in the universe because things seem chaotic and random. So I don't necessarily believe in a God, but I might believe in some kind of force behind what's going on, or a natural will of some sort that is behind nature. And so I'm curious to see what people think. I heard arguments that the universe and life was formed out of the universe through forces like gravity and magnetism and stuff like that. So what do people think? Because I know some of us here definitely do not believe in God and probably have some thoughts on this topic of where life comes from. So.
Who wants to go first?
Yeah, does anybody want to?
Okay. I like the idea. I'm not sure that I believe this, right? But I like the idea of a cosmic consciousness of some sort that kind of that may not even be a consciousness as we perceive it in human terms, which I know that sounds real sketchy, but something that's like an organizational principle that meshes everything together, that has some type of cohesion, some kind of progress to build things, structures, which can amount to life or can allow for life. I don't know that I fully believe that. I know that I don't believe in a God as in the classical sense of an anthropomorphic God, right? I don't believe in that. And are there other intelligences? Like if we ask that question, like what you're saying, then there's the assumption that that would go along with that perhaps there are other species, other races that are developed like us in other galaxies or whatever, and are they do they answer to the same forces that we do, right? So like if there's a cosmic consciousness of some sort, does that dictate what they do the same way that our DNA and everything kind of dictates what we do? Or is there another consciousness or another force, right? I don't know that I believe any of that, but I do believe that consciousness is something that's like emergent, that comes from an atomic level. And I think that certain particles, certain forces have a, I don't know if they would understand this, but I think they have a purpose to work towards a certain goal, to do a certain thing, to perform a function. Now, whether that's chaos, whether that's something that's just a chaotic thing, or if that's an organized thing, I don't know. But it does seem strange that if it's not a conscious process, if it's not a force of will kind of thing, it does seem strange that there is so much cohesion, right? That there's so much order in the, because I would imagine there'd be a lot more chaos in the universe if there wasn't. But I have a hard time believing in a, say, a God in it. I know that's kind of roundabout, but that's where I'm at on it. So.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on this? I'm trying to find people to talk me out of my agnosticism, because I've explained my thoughts on the matter, but it just seems too convenient. You know, things seem to be working too well to me, or
well,
just be random.
Can I ask you a question? Why do you want to be talked out of your agnosticism?
Oh, that's a good question.
Like I'll tell you, I have an agenda here. Why I'm asking that question.
Yeah.
One thing that bugs me within the great debate online is this idea that you have to either be a theist or an atheist, and that agnosticism is somehow either a cowardly position or an intellectually untenable position, or is at best a temporary position, or it's intellectually dishonest or something like that. And that seems wrong to me. I mean, I speaking for myself, I was a theist. I was a fundamentalist, and on my way to becoming an atheist, I transitioned into an agnostic along the way, where I really could not make up my mind. If you asked me, is there a God or is there no God, I couldn't have said yes to either one of them. So I was neither a theist nor was I an atheist. I would not say there's no God, and I wouldn't say there is a God. I mean, I was right on the fence. And some people say, well, how could you be like 50-50? Well, I saw that there were reasons to make me think there was a God, and I saw there were reasons to think that there was no God. And I saw problems with both of those arguments too. I mean, I could not make up my mind. Simply couldn't make up my mind. And there are different reasons why you might not be able to make up your mind. It could be simply that of the reasons that have been presented and the reasons against, believing in God, you might find, there's something to be said for this, and there's something to be said for the other side, and I can see problems with both sides. And so you can be in that position of not being ambivalent, not caring, but simply not being able to, with any degree of confidence, say it's more likely this than that, right? Or you might be sort of like, well, one day I'm inclined to, believe in God, and then the next week I'm inclined to think probably not, and then arguably you're a theist one week and an atheist the next week. But I mean, I think that's really kind of getting a little weak there. But there really are people who are sort of on the fence. But then there are other people who are agnostic, who are of the view that, look, there's never going to be sufficient reason to warrant any confidence in a God, and there's never going to be sufficient warrant for any confidence in the proposition that there's no God. So neither theism nor atheism are a rational position. This was the position of the fellow who came up with the term agnosticism, Thomas Henry Huxley. He coined the term in the 1850s, and he coined that term because it was his view that both theism and atheism were irrational positions, right? It's not that one of them, it's not that they were both false. One of them had to be true. There either is a God or there isn't. But believing there's a God and believing there's no God were both, as he saw it, ultimately unjustifiable. It's not that he thought that they were just presently unjustified. It's that he thought it was unjustifiable. So that's sometimes called a Huxleyan agnostic. So you can be an agnostic who's sort of just a fence sitter. I can't make up my mind. But if by your lights the evidence goes, either way, then you should be on the fence, right? Being on the fence is the rational position. That's exactly where you ought to be, and you shouldn't think of it as like a temporary position, right? Or you're just transitioning from one to the other. And if you're the other kind, the Huxleyan kind, well, then of course you need reasons for insisting that the question is always going to be unanswerable. That's a stronger claim. That's a claim about not just about the present state of the evidence, but what the state of the evidence will always be. So it's a much stronger claim. But I mean, if that's your view, then that's your view, and you shouldn't be thinking that there's something weak about that position. I mean, certainly the Huxleyan view is not a weak position. It's a very strong position, actually, in the sense that it's adopting a very hard line. But even fence sitters, right? I mean, fence sitter is such a I've called them fence sitters myself, but when I say it, I don't mean it disparagingly. But one way to think of it is they are provisional agnostics. Provisionally, I'm agnostic. I'm just waiting to hear an argument one way or the other that is convincing, and then poof, I'll become a theist or I'll become an atheist, right? So I think maybe provisional agnostic might be a way to characterize one's view if you're a fence sitter. So I don't know what your reasons are for wanting to be talked out of your view, but I don't think that you should. One thing you shouldn't do, in my estimation, is let people pressure you into making up your mind.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
The analogy I use is this: supposing I asked you the number of hydrogen particles in the universe right now. Okay, in that particular moment, that picosecond, right? I mean, there was some positive integer, some vastly huge positive integer that would describe the number of hydrogen particles in the universe in that particular moment. Now, is that an even number or an odd number? Well, who the hell knows? Now, imagine if someone said, well, look, it's either an even or an odd number. Make up your damn mind. You can't be on the fence. Well, yes, you can be on the fence. I don't have any reason one way or the other. And a lot of people, when it comes to the God question, are that way. Now, to people who've made up their own mind, it's usually so clear-cut in their own mind, they think, how could anybody be on the fence on this, right? But you can be. You can just be, look, given the state of the evidence, as I see it, I can see how it could be both ways. I can think of good reasons one way and good reasons the other way, bad reasons one way, bad reasons the other way, counter-arguments for all of those. And I am just stuck here until something tips the balance, and that might never happen in my lifetime. Right, and until it happens, I shouldn't be irrational about it. Sorry?
I think you pointed out good on what he's asking you and what you just said about how someone else can be clear-cut on the answer being one way or the other. When you meet so many people like that, it throws off in your head, well, maybe I'm missing something here, so I do want to be talked out of this position.
Right.
Or that I should be talked out of this position because this guy's so confident with, or I see so many confident people making this claim.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry if I hope I didn't derail the discussion there, because I know you were trying. You mentioned your agnosticism for a different reason, and you mentioned only it was kind of a throwaway remark. I want to be talked out of it, but
no, it was great. I mean, it's all good stuff.
Okay, well, it's consequential to me because I have this discussion quite a lot with people, and it bothers me when agnostics are automatically subsumed under the heading of atheist or something like that, and agnostics are constantly being told, oh, well, that if you won't affirm that there's a God, that makes you an atheist, And most agnostics bristle at that because they know, hey, listen, if I thought there was no God, I'd call myself an atheist. I'm precisely a person who doesn't think there's no God, just as much as I'm precisely the person that doesn't think there is a God. Okay, I can't assent to either proposition. I don't think one is more likely than the other. I'm stuck here. Okay, and and even calling it stuck is kind of disparaging. It makes it sound like it's an untenable position, and it isn't necessarily, right? It all depends.
Right.
I mean, you can have crappy reasons for being an agnostic, right? You might think that certain arguments for God or certain arguments against God are really good, that are in fact transparently bad arguments, right? So you can be an irrational agnostic, right? You can be an agnostic for all the wrong reasons, just like you can be a theist or an atheist for all the wrong reasons. So I don't mean to suggest that because it's a tenable position that it is therefore necessarily the rational position. I think it would be irrational. No position is automatically rational. A position is only rational based on the reasons you have for it. No conclusion is automatically rational or irrational. There's no such thing as a default position that is rational. That's a stupidity that people utter all the time, but that a certain position is the rational position by default, and that's ridiculous. It all depends on how you get to a position that determines whether or not the position is rational.
Right, and like I definitely feel like it would be really hard for somebody to talk me out of my position, because I feel like I have sort of spiritual experiences in my life all the time through my experiences in my life, and the ways like how the things I experience build towards something, and I notice through determination and focus, I'm able to like reach some goal or something like that. And just the way my body works together, and how the universe around me plays a role in my life and things like that. It kind of fascinates me, and it doesn't make me feel like I could just say there's nothing behind that, because I'm experiencing some weird things. You know, life is kind of an odd sort of thing. So,
yeah, I might be able to relate to that a little bit. I know that when I was a theist, I believed that everything that happened in my life had significance. Things happened for a reason. And when you walk around with that, I'm not saying that that's how you see it, but I think I can relate to it a little bit in that I can recall looking at events that in hindsight now seem to be perfectly meaningless events, but at the time were invested with significance. They seem to fit a pattern. They seem to be pointing to something. I used to interpret things this way all the time. I saw signs in everything. Events were fraught with significance in a way that they're not now, and I think I was mistaken to think that they were so weighted with significance and purpose, and that there was some kind of overarching narrative or story going on there. But at the time, it seemed to make a lot of sense to me, and so I would look at an event, and I couldn't just look at it as shit happens. I just couldn't look at it that way. And it's hard to say what changes you, but I don't think it's just, at least in my case, it wasn't like some rational argument that just talked me out of it. It was a sort of a broader shift that happens in your psychology, where at some point you start looking at things around you and you go, yeah, I think I was reading a lot into that, and that I was motivated. And so that was the case for me. And I don't know what your situation is. I'd have to hear the specifics, but yeah, I can understand that feeling of there's more to the story than just matter in motion,
right,
and particles bouncing around in fields of force and stuff like that. It seems to me that there's something going on here, something designed. There's too much order. There's too much regularity. There's too much harmony. There's too much sophistication. There's too much stuff that seems non-random. This just seems orchestrated. It seems coordinated. It seems to have a telos, a purpose, an end. And I can understand that intuition, right? And I think anyone who loves the natural world as I do, it is sometimes strongly tempted to think that way.
And it's hard to deny intuition, even when you know what the actual case is. It's hard to just change your intuitions.
Right. Yeah, and so yeah, and it's a supposition about how I'm relating to things in my life, and how the things I do and the things I think create circumstances and stuff like that. And it doesn't seem like something you can just understand. But I guess you said that now you look back on it, and you look back on the experiences that you've had, and you kind of pass it off as just something that happened, or? Yeah.
I mean, it's hard for me to recall specific instances, because I was an adolescent when I thought this way. I sort of tumbled out of my religion in my late teens and adolescence, around 17. By the age of 17 or 18, I was calling myself an atheist. So I mean, I was quite young. So it's really kind of hard to cast my mind back to specific instances. But I remember, around that time, sort of looking at things that I had thought were significant, things that people had said. Like here's an example of the kind of thing that would go on. Like I would a thought would enter my head, right? And I'd go, why did I think that? And then I would, well, I had some concern at the time, and I would say, well, that must have been God putting that there, to nudge me in a certain direction. It's like, God is sending me clues. He's hinting, this was a sign, right? And as I understood it, it was like, well, why would that thought enter my head out of the blue? How did that thought come out of there, right? It was only later that I realized, how do any thoughts come into my head? I mean, they all seem to come out of the blue when I think about it, right? I mean, I don't know where my thoughts come from. They just, boop, they come into my head. I don't really direct my thoughts. I don't know how the sentence is going to end, really, right? I just tagged the word "really" at the end of there. I didn't expect to do that. I just did. I didn't, so all my thoughts just come to me. But so that's an example of what I mean. Something as simple as, why did that thought enter my head? Why did I suddenly remember that? Or why did I suddenly, think that? It must be because God put that in my, the Holy Spirit was acting there and popped this idea into my head to make me realize something, right? To turn my mind in a certain direction, and take a certain course of action. It was usually a moral question that was troubling me, and then I would look for signs when I felt morally perplexed.
If you're a determinist, can you think that the thoughts that popped in your head were determined by previous causes, right? And you could say, well, okay, well, the original cause, so to speak, was God, but you don't really need to posit a God here. You can simply say, well, however the universe started out, or however reality first kicked into motion, that's what caused that caused the chain of events that eventually created those thoughts in my head, and regardless if it came from a mind or not, it could simply just the previous events eventually caused the thoughts that I'm having now. If it's all determined.
And I feel like there is some determinism, because I feel like I can't just brush away my instincts or my inclinations or my desires. It can't just be easily ignored or pushed away or changed. I think things are set in a particular way, that something is building, but I do think also I have some will to change or modify what's going on or what I'm thinking. But I have to do it through conditioning. I don't feel like it's something I can just alter. So it's kind of like deterministic free will. I don't know.
I think you'll find if
Compatibilism?
Conversations and find the definitions that it won't be so hard of a thing to pin what you're thinking about it on.
Yeah. I mean, like, I have these inclinations and thoughts about things, but I'm sure there's some sort of philosophical name for it or something, some kind of thing. So.
Yeah, there's soft determinism and compatibilism. Sounds more like, whereas a little bit of both, or depending on how you define them.
Right.
They can work together, kind of thing.
Right. Any thoughts on that before we move on, guys?
Well, not on that, but I was curious about your, like, so do you think life has a purpose?
I kind of do.
Okay.
Okay, and I think this because I see people that are chaotic, that act chaotically or destructive, or who have negative tendencies. I see them hurting themselves and other people, and things that they create seem to fall apart. And this is kind of I mean, religion talks about this. This is a philosophical idea. You kind of see this all over the place. And I see people who have goodwill towards each other, who try to keep things equal. They try to give and take equally, and they support other people, and they also get to support when the ecosystem functions in that way. I see it working a lot better, and I think that it is possible for there to be growth and harmony in an environment, whereas also there could be chaos. If the shark eats too many fish, then all the fish die and the sharks die. So there has to be a harmony there, and human beings can do the same. So that kind of seems like the ultimate goal of nature, to create a eventual harmony. but it's all hypothetical. So.
But I think I'd put it up in that post earlier because you keep referring to like seems like it has a purpose and things, and there are views. There's a teleonomic view, which nature presents itself as if it has some kind of intended purpose behind it, even though it might not. It may, but even though it may not, it still appears this way.
Yeah, it could be a coincidence, you know. But any thoughts on that?
I go along with what Dan Barker says, that we don't have a purpose-driven life, but we have life-driven purpose. I think we have purposes because we are biological beings with needs and desires. If you think about it, every second of our day, we're trying to satisfy some sort of need or desire. Even when we're sleeping or unconscious, our body is still breathing because we need air. And when we're conscious, we're constantly trying to fulfill our needs and desires, whether it be looking for food or simply because we're bored, trying to find something to entertain our minds and so forth. In fact, I believe if we didn't have anything to kind of stimulate ourselves, we would go mad if we're not able to receive any input at all. So I think this by our very nature, having needs and desires, that is where purpose comes from.
And more specifically, human input. In prisons, when they go to punish an inmate, what do? They put them in solitary.
Yeah, I remember it was the Tom Hanks movie. Was it Castaway, I believe, where he started talking to a volleyball. It was Wilson volleyball, so he called it Wilson. And when he was trying to get back to civilization, Wilson fell off his raft and floated away, and Tom Hanks wept because he lost his only friend, even though it was just the volleyball. But for him, that was his only companion for I don't know how many months he was away from civilization. But that's how it meant to him. And it seems like it's built into our biological makeup to be social creatures and want to have some sort of companionship.
Yeah. I suppose your perspective changes too if you're on an island, and all you have is a volleyball to talk to. Kind of changes, creates new suppositions about reality. Interesting. Okay, guys. Anything else to add on this? Joe, welcome to the room. Do you have anything to
add? Just one question, because I sort of came in when Ozzy was talking about, or when everyone was talking about determinism and free will and so forth. And I've always wondered, or I'm wondering, is how does determinism and invention, how does that work? So I've always tried to work out if our minds are determined, how do people invent? What causes one person to invent something and another person not to? I find that intriguing.
I don't see that as different than anything else. I mean, consider the sentences coming out of my mouth. Okay, I've just uttered a sentence right now, and I don't know if anyone's ever crafted a sentence like the one I've just crafted, or take the last 5 sentences I've just uttered. Has anyone ever anywhere uttered those exact sentences in that string of words in that exact order? Probably not. Okay, there's an invention. Okay, we're constantly sort of doing new things that have never been done before. Novelty is nothing new. So the idea of coming up with an invention in the sort of the canonical sense of a new contraption or something like that, right? And that's just a special case, of what we do all the time, right? when we're willing things to happen, when we're willing what our thoughts are going to be, when we're willing what our actions are going to be, that's all invention. Constantly, you're constantly inventing a new way to get to the refrigerator, right? If you get up out of this chair and go over to the refrigerator, as I'm about to do, right? You know, if I get up and walk over the refrigerator, I'm probably not going to trace the exact same trajectory through space, right? I weigh a little bit differently. I'm wearing different clothes. The lighting is a little different. I'm approaching it and leaving the chair from a slightly different angle. The chair is in position the same way. I'm solving a problem, the problem of getting to the fridge, in a novel way. Every walk down the street is problem solving, right? It's just that it's all going down at the level of the plumbing. I'm not aware that it's happening, right? So I mean, you know, and cats do this, right? I mean, so you don't need this idea of sort of free will, of a will that's free of causal determining factors. The sort of the problem of invention and novelty is ubiquitous. It's constant. We're constantly solving problems in new ways. Sometimes we're solving the same problem in new ways, right? And sometimes we're solving a new problem, right? And it's when someone comes up with a solution that stands apart, right, from other ways, then we call it an invention, right? Invention is ubiquitous. It's never ending, right? So I don't think that sort of the case of the kinds of cases that you're talking about are particularly special. They're not particularly problematic from the standpoint of free will and determinism. I see them as just sort of special cases. So then the question would be, well, you know, how is any invention possible? Even the invention of how I'm going to sort of, you know, navigate across the room, you know, how am I going to solve the problem of crossing the room in the new way that I'm about to do when I cross the room? I'm going to do it a little bit differently. It's going to be a novel solution, right? How am I going to do that? Well, who the heck knows how we do that? I mean, it does appear. I mean, how does a robot do it? I mean, if you build a robot that crosses a room, right, and there are obstacles in the room, right, it is coming up with a new way of crossing the room, but clearly free will doesn't enter into it, does it?
Yeah, I was going to say
not free will in the way that we think.
I was going to say, analogize it to something that we usually wouldn't put free will to, like a river forming or a pond or a puddle. They're not going to form in the exact same way in the exact same place every time, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Now, in the case of a robot, though, we know that the robot is programmed to cross the room, just like a chess playing program is programmed to win at chess, right? But you don't have to program in every possible way that chess could be played for a chess playing computer to win at chess, right? You know, but chess playing computers solve the problem of how to avoid getting into checkmate and how to sacrifice their queen, but they don't have these thoughts, right? So nothing conscious has to be going on to solve these problems, right? I mean, it's kind of, you know, sort of mind-blowing to realize that a system doesn't have to be pre-programmed to have causal determinants, right? You can build a machine that solves a problem that navigates through space or something like a robot or something like that, but you don't have to anticipate every possible move, right? We can, in fact, I can't, but we can collectively program computers that are exquisite at chess and can beat, you know, the best grandmasters in the world, and yet no one ever sat down and said, okay, here's what we need to do to make sure that this thing is the best chess playing computer. We need to anticipate every possible move and anticipate every possible way that chess could be played. Every, you know, like the billions and billions and billions of combinations of chess games, we have to program them all in so that it always knows what to do. You know? No, we don't do that. Nobody. That's not how you program anything, right? And I think our brains are engineered by natural selection, by a blind teleonomic process to solve problems in novel ways. But it didn't have to. Nature doesn't have to be conscious. Doesn't need to sort of be able to anticipate every possible outcome. So
in essence, Oz, it has a similar attribute, but it's just one attribute. It doesn't constitute it being a consciousness. It has perhaps a similar attribute.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Governing
there.
Force.
I'm not sure.
I'll have to think about what I mean.
He's asking between a teleonomic and a mind behind it and not a mind behind it.
Oh, okay, okay, right, okay.
Do they have a similar attribute that you're?
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. Well, let me say something about teleonomic and teleological. Okay. The word teleological or teleology is from the Greek word telos, which means and or purpose, right? So if why did I lift up my cup here? Well, I lifted my cup here because I wanted the cup to be in front of the camera. Well, why did you do that? Well, because I was trying to make a point. Okay, so that's why the cup is in front of the camera. Why did Ozzy lift the cup? Because he wanted to make a point. Okay, so my wanting to make a point, the purpose, the intention of making a point, is part of the explanation for why the cup appeared in view of the camera right there. If you want, you can explain, why the cup is here in terms of atoms and blowing around, and that story would be true, but you'd be leaving something out. One of the causal variables for why the cup is in view of the camera right now is because Ozzy's trying to make a point using the cup. So that would be a teleological explanation. A teleological explanation is an explanation where the anticipated result, the purpose, the function, is part of the explanation. Right? If I wasn't trying to make a point, that cup would not have been there. Right? If I had not intended to make a certain philosophical point there, that cup would not have appeared there. Right? So the fact that I had in mind before I moved the cup to put the cup in front of the camera, that is part of the explanation for why the cup was in front of the camera. Okay, so that's a teleological explanation. A teleonomic explanation is one where something looks like it was designed and intended and purposed, but in fact all of the causal variables have nothing to do with purpose or function or order or design. Right? There just is, as a byproduct, something that looks very, very well ordered and purposed. Okay, so you have a design, but there was no designer. Okay, you have a design.
So Ozzy, so I guess that sort of intent hinges on the agency of, like, agency, or I'm not, I wish my philosophical language was better.
No, agency is the right word. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's determinant on it being a free agent or like a mind.
Well, it has to be a mind. Don't worry about. We won't beg the question whether or not it's a free-willed agent or not. But the point is, the intention, so the conscious intention, or it could even be an unconscious intention. But the idea is that the intention that exists in a mind prior to the effect, right? That intention in a mind prior to the effect is part of the cause for the effect when the effect happens. That's a teleological. That's the telos, right? The purpose is part of the explanation. That's a teleological explanation. Okay. Now, in natural selection, what you have is a teleonomic explanation, right? Something looks as if it's designed, okay, intentionally, but it's not intentionally designed. There's a design there. There's a function that's being served, but there was no mind that was needed to create it. What you have is selective pressures that are filtering out certain things and favoring the distribution and the accumulation of certain other traits. And then as a result, you get an organ, or a limb, or something, or a new tissue, or something like that, right? So a teleonomic explanation is an explanation where, after the fact, it looks like there was an intended design, but in fact, the function, the design that you see, was not intended. Okay, there was no intender, right? So natural selection designs things. Okay, an eye really the eye really is for seeing. Okay, the heart really is for pumping blood, right? It's because the heart pumps blood that hearts are around and continue to stay around. It's because eyes are for seeing that they continue to see. And when you put an organism or a population of organisms like cave fish, and you put them in an environment where light can't hit their eyes, right? The function of having eyes ceases to exist. There's no advantage to vision in cave fish, and so they lose their vision eventually.
So these are more or less things that are emergent that come to be through the progress of time and through just random events? I don't think they're random events, though.
No, they're not. No, well, no. Natural selection is a process where you have variability in a population, okay, and at least some of that variability is heritable, okay, and the environment constitutes a selective standard against which the organisms, the population, can either thrive or not, okay, and so some will leave more surviving offspring than others, okay, so natural selection is not a random process, okay. Mutations arise randomly. Selection is a non-random process. Okay, selection is actually quite predictable if you know what trait distributions are in a population, and you know what the selective pressures are, which is enormously complicated. But when you know what the selective pressures are, and in a lab situation or a field experiment, very often you can control those variables. You can control the selective pressures. When you know that, then you can predict what the distribution of traits will be in the next generation, and the generation after that, and the generation after that. Okay. Artificial selection is like animal breeding, right? Dog breeding, horse breeding, pigeon breeding, all of that stuff is a case where we decide what the selective pressure is going to be, right? I want a dog that looks like this, so I constitute the environment. I constitute the selective pressures. I say this dog and that dog, I'm letting them mate. I'm not letting any of the others mate. That's a kind of ruthless, very, very strong, intense selective pressure going on there, which is why we're able to get dogs to look in so many varied ways, right? We were very systematically and ruthlessly letting some animals breed and not letting certain other organisms breed, and so we're able to encourage the traits that we want, and they accumulate, right?
That would suggest an arbitrary factor determinant on, like, artificial, I guess.
Well, yeah, it is artificial. When we're doing it, we call it artificial because we're doing it, right? But when it happens in nature, right, quite blindly, right? Let's say that in one environment it would be more advantageous for organisms to be a little bigger. Okay, well then what that means is in the next generation, the organisms that are a little bigger are more likely to leave more surviving offspring than the ones that are a little smaller. And this can keep, as long as the selective pressure remains consistent or increasing in that direction, you're going to see more and more of that trait accumulating. So what you have here is an undirected process of design. You get things that are designed. Eyes really are designed for seeing. Hands are for grasping. Hearts are for pumping blood. But there's a designer, but it's not an intentional designer. It's not a conscious designer. It's a blind designer, right? So nature, it's like nature is running 100,000 experiments. Okay, you just throw a bunch of organisms out there into different environments, and some environments will see to it that some trait values conduce to leaving more surviving offspring than others, and in those environments, those traits that conduce to leaving more surviving offspring will result in more surviving offspring, obviously.
These emergent properties of these
they're not emergent. They're not emergent properties. There's nothing there's nothing emerging out of some lower state, right? This is simple. This is this. You got to be careful because the expression emergent property is very often used to just sort of mask over something some property arising, and we don't know how to explain it. And we know how to explain how eyes evolved, right? We know how to explain how hearts evolved. Right?
So it's the system itself that governs.
There's no system. There's no system. No, natural selection is the force that isn't there. It's the invisible hand. Okay, it's take away all intention, take away all purpose, take away all planning. Just leave nothing but competition. Organisms striving to reproduce, right? And you will find that they can't all reproduce equally well. Why? Because some of them happen to be born with traits which they can pass on, that conduce to leaving more surviving offspring, that make them better adapted to that environment, right? I mean, supposing that every time I have sex, I leave offspring, okay? Supposing you have sex 50 times and once in 50 you leave offspring. What do you think is going to happen one generation from now? Okay? In the next generation, my genes are going to be massively overrepresented compared to yours, right? It's just simple math. It can't happen any other way, right? So that's a sort of a trivial example there. Or supposing I have a trait that makes me massively more attractive to females. Okay, this is getting absurd now, but
now we know how Ozzy really feels about
verging
himself.
on the unimaginable. But let's say that I was irresistible to women. Okay, I mean there's a trait. I mean being sexy, being irresistible to women, is a trait that that very much conduces to reproductive success, right? So what are the chances that if women find you hideous, but they find me gloriously attractive and sexy, and they want to, just peel their clothes off and have sex with me, what are the odds that in the next generation there'll be a lot of kids that look like you and not like me? No, it's going to be the other way. In the next generation, there are going to be kids who look like me, a lot more kids that look like me than kids who look like you. Okay, so that'd be a case of what we call sexual selection, right? There's nobody governing. There's no system in place here. This is the absence of a system.
It sounds like
take away
feedback.
all system. It's not feedback. Take away all. There's no feedback. There's nothing feeding back on itself, right?
Oh.
There's no recursion, right? What you have is, I mean, just think about it, okay? Let's say that every time let's just say this. Let's just
Maybe
say
the feedback's the outcome itself, in that you can have more children or whatever because they peel their clothes off. That's the recursive feedback element that's coming back causally.
Coming back to what?
To your the fact that you have an advantage.
Well, it doesn't feed back to me, right? It gets passed on, right? So it's not.
Well,
there's no feeding back.
it feeds back in the sense that you have more offspring.
Only if nature
okay.
stayed the exact same way all the time, forever.
Yeah, well, I mean, the environment changes, which is why what is an adaptive trait today can stop being an adaptive trait tomorrow. But to the extent that an environment is stable across time, you're going to get local adaptations. You're going to get adaptations to local environmental circumstances. I mean, natural selection is a teleonomic process where organisms end up adapted to their local environments, right? And so, in hindsight, it looks as if the local environment had shaped these organisms, but it didn't. All that happened was differential reproductive success. Some organisms leave more surviving offspring than others, and this is a non-random process. But it's not a directed or intended process. It's a mindless, non-purposive, unguided, non-random process. Just like a filter. A filter isn't random. A filter doesn't let things through randomly, right? But a filter doesn't have to be consciously trying to filter anything. A filter is just a filter. A filter just like a net, just lets some things through and doesn't allow certain other things through. And natural selection is the same way. And the reason this is because the world simply cannot support all the organisms that are born. More organisms are born than can possibly survive. I had a friend once in university who was looking at the reproductive rates of paramecia. Paramecium, those little unicellular organisms that float around in pond water and stuff like that. And I mean, they reproduce, like really, really fast, and they effectively don't die unless something eats them. And so they just keep splitting in two, right? And he worked out that if they weren't gobbled up by something else or something didn't kill them, okay, and if the ponds didn't dry up and kill them all at once and stuff like that, if every single paramecium were to survive descendant from a single paramecium, I can't remember what the time, it was either a week or a month or something like that, but if you started with one paramecium and it split in two, and its descendants all split in two, and none of them died. Okay. I think it was like at the end of a week or something like that, they would outmass the Earth. Okay, that's just paramecia, right? Darwin in The Origin of Species does a calculation on African elephants, which are the most slowly reproducing mammal in the world. They have a gestation time of 2.5 years. A cow elephant is pregnant for 2.5 years.
Wow.
Okay, and he worked out that if you started off with a single mated pair within, I don't know, it was 100 generations or something like that, you'd have like 128 million African elephants standing shoulder to shoulder across the African continent. I can't remember what the numbers are. I just pulled those numbers out of my butt, but they're in the book. I can't remember what they were, but I mean, he said they would be standing shoulder to shoulder across the African continent, right? And that's from a single pair, right? So the selective pressure is really high, right? Way more organisms are born than can possibly survive. Way more organisms are born than can possibly survive. Well, what does that mean? Well, which ones are likely to survive? The ones, obviously, that have the traits that conduce to living. And if you live, you're more likely to live to reproduce. And if you die, you're not going to reproduce, especially if you die before you live to reproduce. And so consequently, the world simply does not allow everything to live, right? And the world is not deciding to kill things, right? It's just
well, I think life itself doesn't, though, because there seems to be a limit to life for all living entities. Almost telomeres shorten or whatever in genetics.
Yeah, but you know, even if that wasn't there would still be things eating one another. So supposing that there was no cell degeneration,
right,
there was no problem with the number of times that you know, the helix could split and stuff like that. There was nothing, you know, supposing that we were all like Wolverine and stuff like that, right? Something could still, like, you know, eat you, and then you would be gone, right? Something could vaporize you or something like that, right? So even if there was nothing sort of internally, if there was no internal clock that was sort of going to run out and cause you to die out, right? You know, there's still too much competition. There are things out there eating one another, right? Some things make a living by eating other things, right? What this guarantees, though, is that the stakes are very high. Because not all organisms that are born can possibly survive, because the majority of organisms that are ever born are going to die, because only a small minority of organisms are actually going to live, what would you expect? Would you expect the trait distribution to be just sort of completely random, or would you expect that on average, given that most organisms die and only a few survive, wouldn't you expect that the ones that on average tend to survive are the ones that have the traits that best conduce to their surviving, to finding shelter, to avoiding predation, to finding food, right, to surviving environmental hardships, all right, you know, droughts, cold, heat, all of that stuff? Yes, of course, that's exactly what you'd expect. So this is not this is a non-random sorting process, right? Natural selection is sorting, but you don't need a mind there to do that, right? It can be completely unguided, completely unintended, completely unguided, and the result will be order, pattern, harmony, integration, sophistication, the accumulation of traits.
Unguided in the sense that it doesn't come from a mind or an agent with right. will or intent.
Unguided in intended purpose.
Unguided in a literal sense. Unguided in the sense that nothing is there to guide it. Nothing is guiding it. Nothing is looking and making sure that the organism...
Wouldn't the environment itself be guiding in a way through feedback with the entity or the animal?
No. It's causing things, right? But the environment doesn't.
Maybe that's what I mean.
The environment isn't causing things to breed, right? It's not causing things not to breed. It's not the environment. The environment isn't a thing, right? Right? The environment isn't a thing that can make choices, right? So even talk of
it's a localized state of affairs that has an impact on the survivability of the biological entity.
Right. It's just, see, the problem is that the word guidance is a teleological term, right? Right?
Ah, okay, I gotta make that distinction with the language.
So watch out with that, right? You can use the word guidance in a
I gotta use more teleonomic.
Well, you can use the word you can use the word guidance in a non-teleological sense, right? Meaning, well, whatever the factors are that result in this, right? But you just got to be careful, because as soon as you start talking about guidance, then people, I mean, it's like when people talk about natural selection, they hear selection. Oh, nature's selecting, nature's conscious, it's making choices, making decisions, it's got values, it's got preferences. No. That's not what we mean by selection. We mean selection like in the sense of like the way a filter selects things, right? A filter doesn't choose what it lets through and what it doesn't let through, right?
Yeah, words have a lot of
just gets through and stuff
come with
yeah,
them.
right, exactly. So the word selection, very often, most of the time when we're using the selection, we're using the word teleologically, but there's a teleonomic use of selection, right? And it's the same thing with design. There's a teleological use of the word design, like this cup was designed to hold hot liquids and to be held in the hand, and so forth, right? So that's the teleological use of design, okay? But to say that the heart was designed by nature is not to use it teleologically. It's to say that the heart is the product of a long series of adaptations, and those adaptations are not teleological either. Those adaptations are just responses to selective pressures, just the accumulation of fitness-conducing traits over time.
Are they purposeful?
Like the rain designed the puddle.
Yes, they have a purpose, but again, the word purpose can be used non-teleologically, right? They have a function. They serve a function, right? But they don't serve the functions of nature. They serve the functions of the organism that has them. Nature has no purposes. Organisms have purposes. Organisms have organs that have functions, right? But nature has no purposes, has no ends, has no intentions, has no designs or anything like that, but organisms can still be designed. So here's the problem that goes on here. A lot of people are worried that if you say that the heart is designed for pumping blood and eyes are designed for seeing, that they're worried that someone's going to come along and say, well, if something is designed, it needs a designer. And I'll say, yes, everything that is designed has a designer. But what you're assuming is that a designer has to be an intelligent designer, a conscious designer, an intentional designer. That doesn't follow at all, right? The designer can be blind, can be mindless, not
especially when it comes to inanimate objects. This is what I find so humorous, is they'll say that there's a designer or intent, and then they'll point, a theist, and then they'll point to inanimate objects, not living objects. Like, it's bizarre, and yet I try to point out, of course my knowledge is so limited in all these things, but what I've read of chemical evolution and cosmology, how the universe began with in essence less complex atoms, like the higher atomic number atoms came about later in cosmology as the Big Bang occurred. And if you look at chemical evolution in particular, something I've been looking at recently, it's fascinating.
Okay, but chemical evolution is different there, because in the case of chemical evolution, there are no functions being served, no interests being served, right? Chemical evolution, in that sense, that's an even more sort of, that's a sense of evolution that's even more divorced from the usual sense of evolution, right? I mean, in ordinary parlance, we talk about evolution, we mean progress. In biological evolution, we don't mean progress, right? And when we talk about chemical evolution, we're just talking about the emergence of new chemicals over time, right? That's it. They serve no purposes. They have no functions or anything.
But they gain complexity, I think, is what
that's right. Yeah. I mean, their atomic number and mass increases. They get greater and greater. You start with hydrogen, and you get fusion, and you get more.
So there seems to be temporally this trend towards more complexity.
I don't think that there's a trend towards more complexity. A trend means it's going to continue, right? There has been more complexity over time, okay? But there hasn't been I wouldn't say that it's trending. Trending implies that it's going to continue, and I don't know that that's true. It might, right? But I don't think there's some principle of complexity that the universe.
The uniformity in nature would suggest such, though, wouldn't it?
Ludic, are you saying that you think, since it has been going towards more complexity, you're inferring that it's probably going to continue?
I don't know, but it would depend on what time duration elapsing that you would account for it. I think there's microcosms like the planet Earth that exists perhaps separately in essence, though existing in the same universe, right? Like there's almost like little seas, like little islands in which these things play out, and do they have an end? Yeah, well, we would know that just by the realization that our sun's going to explode at some point, or something to that effect. We could say that this island might, I don't want to call it a pinnacle, or just be snuffed out, or I don't know. So yeah.
Well, okay. There's a wonderful book on this subject by Stephen Jay Gould called Full House, and it's about this idea of complexification. A lot of people say, hey, you look at the whole evolutionary picture. Just never mind chemistry. Just look at organic evolution, or just sort of organismal evolution. We seem to have more now than we had at the beginning. You start off with very, very simple organisms, unicellular organisms, and even simpler prior to that, and over time you get more complicated organisms, right? But you got to understand that life couldn't just originate with complex organisms, right? How could complex organisms just pop into existence?
It's a series of steps, is what you're suggesting.
Right. So what?
A progression.
But now notice, like, there are more bacteria now than there are other organisms. There are probably more paramecia than there are mammals, right? In fact, I'm sure there's more paramecia than there are mammals, right? I mean, there's probably more paramecia in the pond a block away from here than there are people in New York City. I mean,
more in the sense if you define like each individual entity and added them up that way. If you say you look at it from a different criterion, like say mass or amount of genetic length and code or something.
Individuals. There are more individual paramecia than any other critter, and any other mammals, and all the reptiles, and just add them all up. There's going to be more paramecia. I mean, bacteria, for instance, right? This is the age of bacteria. It has always been the age of bacteria. Okay, there are more kinds of bacteria than there are than there are kinds of mammals, for instance. They outnumber us. I mean, there are so many bacteria in your body right now. There's probably more bacteria in your body than there are people on the earth. Okay, there's more of them, and there's more kinds of them, and they've been around for longer, and they don't know. The age of bacteria and unicellular organisms, and then the invertebrate worms and invertebrate fish, and then it's the age of reptiles and mammals, and no. All this talk of ages is just, this is when these critters that resemble us came onto the picture, right? And as things sort of resemble us more and more, we say this is the age of these critters. Okay, look, it's always been the age of unicellular organisms. Okay, and it's never going to be otherwise, right? Unicellular organisms, it's just a great way to earn a living. Okay, and there's a lot of ways to earn a living as a unicellular organism. Okay, so there's always been more of them. There's always going to be more of them, and more kinds of them. We're not going to outcompete those things. It doesn't make sense to imagine that.
So that suggests.
I'm trying to. Oh, sorry. I just want to answer your question here about this trend. Okay. Life had to start simply. Okay. It didn't move away from simplicity. It stayed simple. But complexity came along the way too. But it's not like complexity replaced simplicity, right? Simplicity is a success story that has never stopped being a success. It's still here. It's still with us. There's no trend away from simplicity, okay? What there is simplicity, a huge success story from the beginning. Things have remained very, very simple. And now there has also been introduced complexity along the way, but simplicity wasn't replaced. Right? It's not like there's this trend away from the simple to the more complicated, right? What you have is if you were to plot,
it seems to me
complexity over time, things have to start simple, and just by sort of a drunk walk randomly, things are going to move away in that direction without any governing principle.
Yeah, so it's virtuous.
What's that?
It's virtuous. It's part of its virtue. It's virtue. It's
no. It's not. No, there's no telos. In virtue, there's a there's a telos. There's no. I
couldn't
don't
make
think
this
that. I don't think that the universe is trying to get. The universe is not trying to complexify, and I see no evidence that the universe is trying to complexify. Okay, there's still a ton of just hydrogen out there. There's
Yeah, but perhaps each agent I don't want to call it agent or entity, we'll call it entity, that its starting conditions when it comes to being might have attributes that limit how far it can progress in complexity temporally. In other words, there's sort of maybe a dead end as to how far it can only go, and that dead ends at less complexity for that particular chain of causal chain. But there could be other causal chains that temporally can progress over longer time frames, and thus gain more complexity.
Sorry, I don't really understand. I'm not
Okay.
trying to be. I really
Yeah,
don't
no
understand.
problem. No problem.
When you
At
talk
first,
about
I'm just a
causal-
layman, so my language and explaining this might be limited. My ideas, coming from left field. But it seems to me when you speak to complexity and you point out single-celled organisms and perhaps atoms that have less complexity or lower atomic numbers, what I'm suggesting is the chainal cause of events that led to that bacterium due to the beginning state of it, i.e. its condition, the conditions in which it existed and its attributes, governs how, in terms of causal chain, how far it can go temporally in towards that arrow of complexity.
You mean its lifespan?
And I'm saying it can only go so far, but other causal chains, like us, for example, obviously.
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying. Yeah. So the initial conditions, for instance, of a system, the particular traits or qualities or attributes that a system initially starts with would dictate how complicated something could get, and it might be that something can only get so complicated in any amount of time, whereas something else that starts off differently could end up more complicated. Yes, I think that makes perfect sense to me.
So it's almost probabilistic then. You could look at outcomes in a probabilistic manner and say things that have higher complexity are less probable, but due to the amount of rolls of the dice and and time that's elapsed, it I hate to use the word emergent, but I think feedback's a big part of it too, but I don't know how to describe it yet. I need to learn more cybernetics.
So can I just say that evolution is a religion of origin, and y'all need Jesus?
Ask Darwin to forgive you. Is Steve still there? Yeah, did you have something you were wanting to bring up? Not necessarily on evolution, but on something else?
No, it was just something on earlier. Somebody in the side chat had actually been saying something about agnosticism being a weak position, and I don't get that, because I agree with Ozzy 1,000%. That I don't think agnosticism is a weak position. Agnosticism is a position, and the reason I have agnosticism is because I have come to a conclusion, and my conclusion is that I don't accept either side. And I wouldn't go so far to say I think each side from a theistic or atheistic position is irrational. I know that was the original meaning of the word agnosticism. Both positions are irrational. You don't decide with either one. But I accept agnosticism because I don't think I can come to a conclusion whether I have a knowledge of either one of them or even a belief. However, if I, by my justification, wanted to believe in either side, whether I either believe theism is true or reject it to be atheist, I think that's justifiable. I don't think you have to actually come up with any more reason for why you believe something other than you're wanting to. Or if I just say I want to believe in theism, I do it from just was it fideism? I think I believe it's called. I have no problem with that. But I don't understand this people saying, well, if you're agnostic, you're just a fence sitter and you don't want to pick one side or the other, or you know what, you're just an agnostic, or you're just an atheist, you just don't know it. Because I get that an awful lot. You're just an atheist, but you don't know it. Well, no, if I knew I was an atheist, I would be an atheist.
Right.
So
right.
I mean,
I
just wanted to add that on there earlier because I know it's a little far back, but it just kind of bugs me when people say agnosticism is just somebody who can't decide. Well, no, I have decided. This is where I am right now. May change later on. I reserve the right to change my opinion, my belief. But this is where I'm at right now because I don't have enough information to make a fully conscious aware decision on either side, or to believe either way. And people that have, I respect that just as well. You know, if they believe they can justify their agnosticism by saying they reject God, great. If they say that, you know, they have enough information to support, you know, their epistemology that they know that God exists, well, I accept that. I'm not asking for them to demonstrate it, but I just wanted to throw that out there, that I don't think agnosticism by any means is a weak position. I think it's just as strong position as anything else, and it's a conclusion. I just want to throw that out there. Okay.
And it's not to say that there isn't you can't make a weak case for it. Like you can make a weak case for it. What you're, I think, explaining would be like provisional agnosticism and.
Sure. Oh yes.
The positions are, I think, are fine. You know mine. I'm a Huxleyan agnostic.
You're Huxleyan agnostic.
I have a strong position, a strong argument. But.
Yeah. You have a much stronger position than me on that, though. But I think what I mean by weak position is that when they say weak, that just means that somebody who's just sitting on the fence and doesn't want to make, you know, a decision either way, and they think, and I don't think that's a fair analysis of what the agnosticist position is.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Steve. That's why I feel like I'm an agnostic. So.
Yeah, and I have met agnostics that do waffle. They'll think some days, or maybe in some propositions, they'll just think, yeah, probably, maybe a God does exist. Yeah, I kind of do believe one, and then some days or some propositions, they're back to the other. They do fence it. There are agnostics like that, but to describe what you described, or what Logic described, or what I was saying, these aren't.
Yeah, we're not in that camp.
Not the same position.
Correct.
Even though they're under that heading, agnostic.
Well, and the worst is when they, like I said, when they just somehow default agnosticism into atheism, and that's why a lot of people have, you know, over the last couple months especially, keep referring to me as an atheist, and I know many times I explain to them otherwise, they don't seem to get that, and that's something that's, I think, is more troublesome than anything else. If you identify your position as something and somebody misrepresents your position, I find that to be very, very distasteful, especially in the great community. I find it has no principle of charity. I find it just to be a way to go after somebody personally rather than to say, you know what, okay, this is what you're calling yourself, so I'm going to refer to you as that as well. I mean, I don't like misrepresenting people's positions. I think that's one of the most dishonest ways to actually discuss these topics.
Well, Steve, you'll get used to it.
Yeah.
you kind of have to. I mean,
it's sad that I'll get used to it.
I mean, I was just over in the creationism group on Facebook, and yet again I'm hearing about how evolutionism is like the atheist religion, and it requires more faith.
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
I'll correct it to the
Just grant it. I mean, so what? And?
No, I'm not going to grant it because it's stupid.
I'm not. I'm just saying. Like, what are they going to come back with?
I mean, I actually did grant it.
I granted if this. I said, all right. Well, in that case, doesn't it make it better? It's got more faith, right? Like, no. I said, well, you used it in a derogatory way. Is faith a good or a bad thing? Make up your mind.
Right.
That's a good point. Yeah, faith is a good thing. Then if it takes more faith to accept, you know, evolutionary theory, then wouldn't that be good by their standard?
Yeah, I had to explain to him. He's like, well, does science not blind faith? Does science dismiss faith? Well, he phrased it very poorly. He said, how do you say it? Does science discount faith? Like whatever it was, it didn't really make a lot of sense. But I said. Actually, lost train of thought. I'll get back to it. Move on.
Go back to vaping.
Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing what, from the people who are agnostic, what are the, I guess, what are your, how did you come to sort of, you know, reject atheism completely? I mean, what were the thoughts or the arguments you heard? You thought, no, I can't entertain the idea of atheism being a firm hold, the 100% thing that I have to stick to. I can't. I have. What is it which gives you the entertainment?
I remembered it. Just I told him, I said, faith is not useful in determining the truth of propositions, and he didn't really get back to me after that. I think that's about like the most anyone needs to say when someone says, "Well, I have faith." I'm like, "Well, that's not really useful if you want to determine whether something's true or not." So why are you telling me?
But I just say that I don't have a problem with somebody who has faith if they have faith, reasonable faith. Somebody mentioned earlier about irrational and being irrational. I think if you have a rational thought process, or you come to a conclusion and it's justified because you are rationally thinking about it, I don't have a problem with that. I don't think, some people say, well, atheism is irrational, and then some people say, believing in God is irrational. I think that's stupid from both parties. Neither position is irrational if you have a rational thought process to get to it. As far as what you were asking about, what it is about agnosticism that you don't want to go to the atheist position, it's subjective evidence to me. I mean,
yeah, Michael, it can be something as simple as I haven't ever heard a good reasonable case.
I mean, I don't know if I agree with that. I think if I was aware of any rational thought process to get to theism, I'd be a theist. I'd say, well, it's rational. All right, we've got something then.
Well, but each process is different.
How could you get a rational basis for theism in a universe where it was not the case? Is it possible?
Could I?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, supposing someone has an argument that by your light says, yeah, that's plausible. That could be, I mean, I've heard some deistic arguments that I haven't persuaded me, but that I can understand why a person would even without being irrational, find that convincing, right? The reason I'm not persuaded by those reasons is that I have other reasons for thinking that atheism is true, right? So it's not like it has to be sort of zero sum. If there's an argument for atheism, a good argument for atheism, there can't be a good argument for theism. There can be a good argument for theism in principle, right? Or deism, right? But if there are better arguments for atheism, then you should be an atheist, and vice versa. If you look and you say, yeah, that's a good argument for atheism, but I think there's a better argument for deism or a better argument for theism, well, then you shouldn't be an atheist, right? So, I'm not someone who holds to the view that there are no good arguments on the other side. I just don't think they're as good arguments. I think that there are better arguments for my position. In many cases, I think that those arguments can be defeated. But even when I think they can't be defeated, they don't have to be defeated. It doesn't have to be a defeater or an undercutter for an argument. You just have to have what you think is a better. What's that?
What is required for an argument to be considered rational?
Well,
Maybe that's where there's some kind of disconnect.
Well, the conclusion has to follow from the premises, and there has to be some reason to think that the premises are true. Right.
Well, let me ask you, Ozzy, if I'm looking at the evidence, let's say I'm only looking at the theistic evidence. I don't hear the other side. I know nothing about it. I'm raised in a very religious culture. My family's highly religious. I'm suggesting that at that point, why would it be irrational for that person to believe in God? It'd be very rational because that's what they've been exposed to. They're only looking at the arguments for a deistic position.
Right. Well, what we have to bear in mind is that the expression rational applies to arguments, and it applies to people. You can say of an argument, that's a rational argument, right? Mm-hmm. That is, it doesn't violate any epistemic norms, okay? It's consistent with our norms of good reasoning, good inductive logic, abduction, induction, deduction, and so forth, okay? And we can say that a person is rational when they exhibit a tendency to arrive at their conclusions in an epistemologically responsible way, that is, in accordance with the norms of reason. Okay, so to say that a person is rational is to say of the person that they tend to be a certain way. It's like calling a person a liar. We don't say a person is a liar because they've only ever told one lie. If someone ever told a fib, we don't say he's a bloody liar. We reserve the accusation of being a liar when a person is in the habit of telling lies, or lies easily and effortlessly, or is prone to lying. Okay. Same thing with thief. Everyone's probably, stolen something in their lives, but it doesn't mean that everyone deserves to be called a thief, right? It's something we reserve for people who are in the habit of thieving, or who steal something very, very significant, right? So we understand that these terms have a range of application. So the word rational applies to arguments, and it applies to people. Okay, and in the case of people, we're saying something about the person's general pattern of belief acquisition. okay, and belief revision and belief rejection. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about their the habit of mind that they have with respect to how they arrive at their beliefs. Okay, so a person can, just because a person has an irrational belief, right? They've arrived at a position through irrational means in one area. It doesn't mean that they're an irrational person. I mean, I know people who are irrational who have lots of true beliefs. They arrived at them irrationally, but they happen to have a lot of true beliefs. I mean, most people who are completely irrational are just walking around full of true beliefs, just like the rest of us. They couldn't get around in the world if most of their beliefs weren't true, right? So, you know, they think that, you know, there's a laptop in front of them. They think that coffee is normally served hot, and that ice cream should be served cold, and you know, lots of mundane true beliefs, right? And they can be perfectly irrational, but what we mean when they say that they're rational is we're saying that in general they're kind of sloppy or lousy or irresponsible in how they arrive at their beliefs, right?
Well, you know, I'm sure there are some theistic arguments out there that are better than what I've heard. At least I hope they're better. I feel like I've heard them all, but that can't be true. There's got to be something else out there. However, it feels every time I get a Christian, no matter how liberal, to really get down to it and start showing, like, here's the arguments, here's what really convinced me. It never strikes me as rational. There's always some flaw that's kind of glaring, that I'm kind of surprised that someone as bright as the person I'm talking to would still think that I was pretty good. So, I mean, it's possible that there are rational theists out there. I just don't feel like I've met any. And it might just be bias on my part, and that's, in fact, I think that's likely, but
well,
even when I try to be charitable, I'm like, I don't think that works at all. Even, like, you know, fine-tuning, I'm like, there's some huge flaws in there. How do you not notice them?
I find more that I find Christians that have irrational beliefs more than I find irrational Christians, I think.
Yeah, that's how I would put it too, actually. Most of the Christians that I know, even the ones that are you know, deeply fundamentalist, are for the most part.
You put a good example in the side chat here.
And yeah, well, without sort of naming names, I mean, I know lots of people that are just sort of the most, you know, egregious bumblers in their apologetics for their fundamentalism, for instance, and yet they are perfectly rational in the rest of their lives, right? I think that we compartmentalize, right? And so somebody can be, I mean, think of the people that we know in the great debate community who are sort of so irrational when it comes to religion and various conspiracy theories, right? But in everything that actually touches their lives in any material way, they're as rational as anybody you'll meet. They have jobs, they have friends, they have marriages. You know, they go to parties. They manage to get to work on time. You know, they get to navigate through the world as rationally as anybody else, right? Because they are as rational as anybody else. It's just that they can compartmentalize, and they can, when it comes to certain questions, they can just say, okay, when it comes to these questions, any argument will do, right? All of a sudden, their epistemic standards fall, you know, through the floor. Like I heard an interesting discussion. It was a hangout the other night between a Catholic and an evangelical Christian fundamentalist, and they were arguing about whether the Earth is flat or a globe. Okay, some of you in this hangout will know who I'm talking about. It was an interesting hangout, and what was interesting was that the person who was defending the flat Earth, his epistemic standards for what constitutes good arguments was so high when it came to trying to defend the globe Earth. I mean, it was amazing how high his standards were. The standard of evidence that he was demanding was incredibly high. Mm-hmm. Okay, and yet when it comes to, you know, defending, you know, what's in the Bible and the Genesis story and the story of the Exodus, and, you know, all of a sudden the standards just fall through the floor. Like any argument will do, right? It's amazing how a person's mind will work, and we're all guilty of this to some degree, but because of motivated reasoning. When we're strongly motivated to believe something, we lower our epistemic standards, and when we're inclined to think that something is false, we raise the bar on what would change our minds. So our minds work kind of in a funny way. We have a tendency to look for permission and look for ways out. When you like a belief, Okay, when you hear a belief, hear a proposition and you want to believe it, okay, you like it, it sits well with what you already believe, even if it's not part of your belief set yet, you haven't adopted it into your belief set, but it sits well with your existing beliefs, and so you're inclined towards it. What happens is you're not looking just at the arguments and weighing the arguments. You have a tendency to reason about it, and you're asking yourself, may I believe this? And as soon as you find an argument that would justify your believing it, you'll go, okay, bang, I'm done. I stop reasoning. I found an argument that supports that belief. Boom, bang, I'm adopting it, right? And so you only reason so far. And when
I try to catch myself when I'm doing that. Like when I read one article, I'm like, oh, that fit with what I expected. Wait, maybe I should check a little further.
Yes, confirmation bias.
Right. Well, that's confirmation bias. Yeah, but
I think I sometimes overcorrect for that. Like, for instance, one of the reasons I feel it's when I phrase it this way, one of the reasons I feel so strongly that Christianity, like I know that Christian metaphysics are not the case, is because in a sense, I want them to be true. I would like to live in a world with a loving deity that's going to bring me up to a happy place forever. That sounds great. I wish that was the case, but I have to counter, like, because I think it's the case. I want more evidence for it because I want to counteract the biases instead of going even stronger against the propositions.
Yeah, but remember, I mean that's true, but I mean, I would like to hear an argument that implies that death is an illusion, or that some exception is going to be made in my case, so that I'm not really going to die. I would like that, but I happen to know that the religions like Islam, Judaism, Christianity that promise this also come bundled with a pile of stuff that I don't like. So I mean, I would be lying if I said, well, I would really like this idea of heaven and stuff like that. It's just that whole story, that whole religion comes bundled with a bunch of other doctrines that I think are odious and ridiculous or ugly that I don't want to believe are true. And so it's not true that I'm strongly motivated to believe it. If that was all that was on the table, maybe, but I happen to know that it comes packaged with something else. And the other things in that package strike me as ugly. So I have to be honest enough to say, no, on balance, Christianity strikes me as grotesque, right? So maybe the idea of living eternally.
That's almost charitable way to put it sometimes.
And well, I mean,
if you go with like the Calvinist or evangelical interpretation, that's almost charitable to say grotesque, like some of the things that are positive.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Calvinism, for instance, I'm not at all motivated to, no matter how strongly they try to sell, God and communion with God and eternity spent in heaven with God in the presence of God and how gratifying that's going to be. The rest of the doctrines strike me as so obscene and odious that I can't find this very attractive, right? It's contaminated with these other things. So it's not the case, for me anyway, that, yeah, trust me, I really want to believe in heaven, but nevertheless, I'm checking myself and making sure that I'm looking for counter arguments. That's not the reason. I mean, honestly, I'm
open to Calvinism.
I don't have a hard time rejecting them, and I'm willing to admit that very often in the case of some views, it's nothing to boast about, but I think we all do this. Just as when you want to believe something, you stop as soon as you find a reason to believe it. When you don't want to believe something, we have a tendency to stop thinking about it as soon as we find a reason not to believe it. Right?
Well, it seems to me there's an emotional accompaniment of things that come with any claim, like any factual claim, and it seems to me that some people place a greater truth value on the accompanying emotion than the facts, the particulars of the claim itself. Like the emotion seems to be important to people.
Yeah, I prefer people to be as dispassionate as possible, to like put the effort in to really try and take the emotion out of it and look at it, try and be as reasonable and rational and as empirical as possible. But there's some people I think that's just not in the wheelhouse for them. That any time they argue for any position, they're going to have to use the least charitable language. I heard someone just the other day, they were referring to it wasn't really an abortion talk, it was something else, but referred to adoption as human trafficking. Like someone who says things like that, there's no way that these people cannot separate their emotions from the argument. They're probably never going to be able to. They'd have to go back to school. They have to relearn some of the stuff that most people learn younger. The kind of basic critical thinking skills. Some people are just missing those. And so yeah, the emotional stuff is what really matters to them, and it's frustrating to deal with sometimes.
Yeah, when you're trying to make the argument for other people, I agree, because I don't necessarily think it should be disjointed from your own beliefs. I think there's that component's gonna be there of what you latch onto, but if you're making arguments, factual arguments of the case, then cold calculating is better.
Yeah, like you feel like you present like a strong, reasoned, empirical argument with as little emotion as possible, and the response comes back with, "Yes, well, obviously you're being screwed with by demons from hell, you monster." You're like, I try to cut the emotions out. I mean, just dial it down a little bit. You're at 11 here already. We just started talking.
Well, I think that goes back to them wanting to accept anything that supports their position, no matter how minor, and even if it is something really outlandish, they're going to throw that out there just as a deflection if you have a good argument to them. Because I see that all the time. Like,
well, or just
guys.
holding on to a belief because of your emotional attachment to it can be an issue. But,
So I think this is a good time for me to add something. So part of the reason for my agnosticism is because, and Ozzy mentioned this earlier, that when he goes out in nature, he likes nature, and that gives him something cognitively. And for me too, when I'm out in nature, I feel something. I feel very connected to nature, so I feel it's kind of like a spiritual thing. So I mean, if I'm talking about the concept of God, I wouldn't say like there's like this guy in the sky sort of thing. If I'm thinking about God, I would think of it as some sort of force or something that's causing nature to move in a direction or some kind of thing like that. And because there seems to be something that could possibly be there hypothetically, that's a reason for my agnosticism. And that's not necessarily logical. It's something that's kind of intuitive, and there is a bit of an emotional aspect to that. And so it doesn't make me right, but it's kind of like something like I have a tendency towards this way of looking at things. And so it's like something that I can't necessarily ignore.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so yeah, that's there. So I could just ignore that and just say, okay, well, that's just hypothetical. I'm just going to ignore this. I'm going to ignore that. This is my experience of nature and how I'm related to all these patterns, and there's growth and balance and stuff like that. I can ignore all of those factors and just say, well, it's just there. But there's something that I feel, and I'm using the word feeling. I feel like there's a little bit more to it that I can't just say, well, nah, there's no way there's something going on here. There's no sort of will to it all, you know?
Yep, absolutely.
But I don't know. Any thoughts on that, guys?
No, I thought that was great. That makes sense.
Yeah,
I don't think you should I don't think you can jettison your emotion from how you form your beliefs.
I don't think so either. I think it's an integral part, and I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I don't think it makes me right, you know, but...
Yeah, I did want to say a little something about, was it agnostic? What was it inside Xbox was mentioning it?
I listed off the two
agnostic
position.
You. I think the issue is, you said, there's no way to prove it either way. I turn the camera off for a second. Yeah.
Hi, sweetie.
I think the issue is that it's not that there's no way to prove it. It's that we live in a godless universe. So God's not going to show up and actually give the evidence that would be required, that most people would require from any other claim about the natural world.
Well,
the fact is we don't have any.
What do you expect from a God?
Well, I mean, there could be. The thing is, it's kind of hard to tell because we don't live in a universe with a God. So let's say let's say we did live in such a universe. Let's say we did live in a theistic universe with a God that was ever present. That you were sometimes you get into a car wreck and it would be unfortunate. Other times the God would appear, stop the car wreck, ask you for a prayer or two, and then disappear in a cloud. And that in sciences there are things you would discover that he would come down and say, okay, that's me. There's no way you're going to stand this. It's purely something only I can do because I'm the one who made this universe. There could be copious amount of instances of what we would call the supernatural, and it would just be ever present and it would be obvious to everyone.
Right.
Science might be methodological naturalism, but everyone would understand that yes, these things though, obviously that's God because He's told us. He comes down, He explains these things, and He can show that it's Him doing it. And while He's not predictable, He's somewhat predictable in His unpredictableness. And if we lived in such a universe, everyone would be a theist, or almost everyone would be a theist.
Right.
Towards that God, though, you're just singling out, I guess, just one thing, one type of a a god.
Well, I'm saying it is possible that we could live in that universe, and he just hasn't shown up yet. But there's no reason to think that yet. Just like there's no reason to think we're in a brain vat. What we do see is what we would expect if gods were fictitious. We would expect multiple different stories all through through books. I mean, what's one of the worst ways to relay a story through time? Through single books by people who are not even remotely dispassionate about what they're telling you. Any God that understands that made us will understand how we figured out how to reason properly, and those would be the methods that he would rely on to get his message across.
Oh yeah. No, even as a Huxleyan agnostic, I think there are gods I am quote unquote atheist to, that I don't believe, that believe can't exist. That lots of the religious ones are that way. But
it's just, I mean, how many God concepts do you have to go through, listen to, and then dismissed as spurious before you're like, okay, I'm pretty sure the whole enterprise is just, it's never going to come through. We're never going to have one show up and go, you know what, this one was the one that was right. Or, hey, you guys never caught the right one, but now I'm here and I'll explain what the real religion is. I see no reason to think that's ever going to happen.
Yeah, back away from all the theologies and see what's left, and then weigh that out. That would be the overarching question of, could a god, any kind of god, exist? Is there any amount of properties or things like that would still remain if you removed all the theologies?
Actually, I want Ludic to say what he said in the side chat. That's great.
Oh, okay. What did I say here? I don't think those Christian theological and supernatural claims even require analytical refutation. They simply don't follow at face value 99% of the time, considering our current knowledge, stated knowledge.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I like that.
I mean, even no matter how many ways you take the Bible's claims and try to test them, either they're untestable or they're false. You take Genesis literally, and you've no longer a reason to take Christianity seriously. If that was an important part of it, well, Genesis doesn't follow at all. If you start taking it as some kind of allegory, well, then it's not really telling us anything useful. You're still left with the historical claims, which also are unlikely to be true. You start talking about, well, this person was the son of God. Well, we look at any other historical claim, this doesn't follow at all. So
yeah, I think
when you get the liberal ideas of God, you're like, what are we even talking about anymore? We're talking about some fluffy. Eventually, people start either come up with things that just sound like deepities, or they contradict themselves. Oh well, he's inside and outside above reality. Oh well, that doesn't even make any sense now. I don't know what to do with that.
Well, that's why I keep a distance from a lot of the theologies or specific God claims. It's different from arguing from a religion, from a belief in this God, to getting to where maybe you realize that there's some contradictory property about this specific one, so you're not going to believe it anymore. Then there's a difference in that. Then coming at it from, I don't have any God beliefs. Do any of these make any sense? Well, I don't necessarily have to even start there. You start with, is it even possible for any type of a God to exist before you start getting down to specific ones?
Yeah, possible. I mean, logically possible. Well, that's damn near. That's no contradiction. It's logically possible, but from what we know of how the world works, it seems unlikely.
And then you need good reason. Sorry, go ahead.
Guys, I think for sure there isn't this whole like bearded man in the sky thing with magic powers that can make anything happen. I mean, I think we all could agree that if anything that could remotely be referred to as a god exists, it's definitely not that form. And whatever it is, it doesn't play a role in our lives in terms of us being able to practically see it or experience it. But it doesn't seem like, for me, I can't just conclude that there's nothing going on, that it's just life was just created out of random forces like gravity and magnetism, and that's just the way it is. And for me, it feels like there's something more, but that's intuitive. It's not logical.
Yeah, I mean, is it unreasonable? I'm just curious what you guys think. Is it unreasonable to dismiss all God claims or God concepts that show themselves primarily through personal, single-person experience? Would that be unreasonable or reasonable?
Well, I don't know. It depends, because I think that could be persuasive to believe, but I don't know if you could ever claim about it being true.
I guess I'll add that this God, like most gods, is also the creator of whatever exists here. Is the creator of our universe. In which case, create us knowing how we normally, learn things, how we know things. Usually, the reason we have science in the first place is because we wanted other minds involved to make sure we didn't screw up. So a God that would only talk to us through very personal experiences doesn't make any sense if he created us. It's like, why would something that powerful and that smart make such an obvious blunder to make it almost certain that not everyone was going to believe?
I can think of one reason, because he wants to teach us.
Yeah, teach a class then. Get 20 of us together. Then we're all like,
you can always posit that God wanted it that way. Now, whether that be true or not, if God wanted it that way, everything you're saying kind of just falls to the wayside.
Well, yeah, God could be a dick. The people don't usually posit that religion, but it could be like, yes, we live in a universe with an asshole who created us.
But let's say God said, I want to create beings, and just say, I want to see how many how many follow me by faith alone. And again, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just saying that if they wanted to believe in a deity because they have a mindset that this deity wanted them to believe, he designed people just to see if they would have belief in him just on faith, not upon empirical evidence. Because I do agree that the claims do not require analytical refutation, and I think that almost most of them, if not all of them, that people posit in the great debate community do have an analytical refutation of some sorts, especially in the younger creationist arena. But if somebody just says, well, I believe in a God that just wanted us to have faith in him, and that I have faith in him because of that belief, I don't see that's be a problem, JD.
Yeah, I mean, it's just my opinion, I guess.
I get that, yeah, but what is illogical or inconsistent or irrational about that? It wouldn't be any of the three. I don't think.
I see a problem with it. When people play this God is inscrutable card, right? Well, maybe he just wanted it that way. I don't think that they realize what they're giving up. As soon as you start positing that God has reasons that are unfathomable to us, such that things happen that seem contrary to his attributes, just prima facie, on their face, God behaves in ways that seem contrary to what we would expect a beneficent God that wants a relationship with people and stuff like that. Then when they start saying, well, no, maybe he doesn't want a relationship with everyone, right? Maybe he has other motives. Maybe he knows who he wants to reach, and he's reached those people, and the people he doesn't want to reach, he hasn't reached, right? I mean, as soon as you start making the psychology of this being that inscrutable, you can say anything you want. But worse than that, if his psychology is that inscrutable, that divorced from how our minds work and stuff like that, so that we can't really make reliable predictions about this God based on his actions as they're expressed in the stories, then we can't make predictions and we can't make inferences on his character and mind and future actions based on those stories, right? Because it could be that everything that you think they'll say, oh well, God has this nature. Why? Well, look at this story where he does this, and look at that story where he does that. Look where he says this here. Look where he says that there. Look where he did this, and look where he did that. All of that implies this. No, you don't know. You don't know, because he's got this inscrutable nature, right? When you do this, you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because what you're throwing out is the whole damn thing, right?
What if I have a translator? What if I have the spirit that translates?
Would you also translator? But that's just it. That this idea of the Holy Ghost that acts as a kind of secret decoder ring, a supernatural decoder ring that unpacks the text for you, is completely invalidated by the fact that you can scarcely find two people who will come to the text and agree on what it means unless they've sat down and colluded and talked about it first, or read the same source on it, right? I mean, that's the problem, right? It should be possible to identify who is spirit-filled and who is not spirit-filled, and it should be very, very simple. You just find people all over the world who say that they're spirit-filled, and poll them on their attitudes and views about difficult passages, and there should be some consistency among some group of them, without having studied a particular theology and without having colluded and talked to one another. They should just independently, you should be able to just run this as an experiment and find a consistent theology, okay? But that's not what we find. right?
Especially if you take another religions into account. Yeah.
Well, no, even within one religious tradition.
I'll go back to it.
As near as I can see, every fundamentalist, especially, lives in a parish of one, where with their own theology. You just put them in a room together, leave them alone. Don't just let them talk about the Bible. I've seen this in hangout after hangout after hangout, right? On air and off air, this happens. You get people. They can all be Catholics. They can all be fundamentalists. It doesn't matter what you do. You put them in there and you let them talk long enough, and you don't go in there and you don't criticize their religion. Don't put forward an alternative religion. Don't talk like an atheist or an agnostic. Just let them talk. And what you will find is that they start to fall apart over theological issues, right? Where is the Holy Spirit doing this work? I don't see any evidence of this. I mean, one of the arguments I have against Christianity is that as I can see it, this idea of the Holy Spirit that informs people is manifestly contradicted by empirical evidence. I just don't see.
I heard this recently. Recently, talking with a Christian that brings up that you have to have this specific theology that once saved, any knowledge that the Spirit gives to you is absolutely the truth.
I was just going to bring that.
Yeah, that obviously it's not true. It's just, there's no way to put like, nope, sorry, that's not true. We can check your spirit.
Well, that's what I would want to see. That's what I guess I would need, is to see the people that hold to that theology and say the Spirit, that there is no that there is no agreement between any number of them.
It's about the very nature of the salvational issue of once saved, always saved. Goes back to what Ozzy's saying. If it's such a critical importance that we need to know whether you're once saved or all saved, because I mean that's a big deal. I mean, I believe in.
No, but you could be deceived about being saved.
Well, yeah. My point is though, where's the Holy Ghost giving?
How does it work though?
The Holy Ghost hasn't told one person, "Hey, you're once saved, always saved," and have told another person, "No, you can lose your salvation," or you can have easy peasy grace, whatever they call it. I mean, they all have different answers. I agree. How can they all have such vastly different inferences of salvational issues if the Holy Ghost is going to be the filter by which they acquire knowledge about the deity?
Yeah, I mean, there's a joke about this.
That there's no agreement between some of these groups on what they're saying the Ghost tells them.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I wanted to add in. There's a joke. Probably a lot of us have seen about that. A guy's about to commit suicide, and one comes up and is like, "Hold on, you're a Christian? Yeah, me too." And they go through a list, and then it's like, you Reformed, Baptist Church, Reformation of 1892? No, or 1915. 1915. And he's like, "Die, heretic!" Throws him off the bridge. So yeah, it's like if you could just keep breaking it down, and every time you break it down, you've got disagreements from these people who all claim to have the Holy Spirit telling them exactly what's the case.
I understand for non-essentials, what they call non-essentials. I can get that, okay, but to me, I would consider salvation to be something inherently essential, wouldn't it?
I mean, there's some big things, like anything having to do with the resurrection and crucifixion, you think are huge things.
I get the big swaths, even about the small things. I get how big swaths of them disagree on a lot of things, how we have denominations.
Mm-hmm.
But
the Trinity,
let's say
Jehovah's Witnesses
essentials, because
the whole segment.
The Bible, the Ghost doesn't have to reveal the essentials to me. So just the Ghost has to help me interpret other things.
Okay, but
it's hard for me to believe that there's no group of agreement in that. In any of these faiths, without taking the theology.
Wait, yeah, that's the problem as I see it. It's not that they don't all agree. Of course, they don't all agree, right? It's unproblematic that they don't all agree, and it's not, and the problem isn't even that you can't find plenty of agreement among certain groups. It's that you don't find plenty of agreement among people independently unless they're part of the group. Unless they have been indoctrinated and embraced a certain tradition, you don't find people just independently coming up with these doctrines, right? And that should be happening, right? And apparently, the Holy Spirit only is able to generate agreement when people join a church or buddy up against somebody who already has a certain set of ideas and they absorb those ideas and stuff like that. That seems to be how it always works.
Wouldn't I have at least a small agreement if I heard what that church said and said, yes, I agree with every bit of that, so I'm going to go to that church? Well, at least right there's at least two people agreeing. the church and that person.
Yeah, but they didn't. But you didn't. No. I don't mean agreeing. And you hear someone say something and go, "I agree with that church." Sit down, read the book, and ask the Spirit to help you, and then come up with the doctrine yourself without ever having heard it, and then go up and say, "Hey, I already believe that. I came up with that on my own."
That's actually a good point. I mean, we don't really have any examples of someone who. Well, there's a joke by, I can't remember his name at the moment, but he said, what would you do if if you had never heard the Bible and found it? You'd chuck it in the bin, right? But let's say someone did do that. Someone actually found the Bible and read it without ever having heard about it before. What would they come up with? I'm guessing their doctrines would be nothing like the ones that have now been arrived at after 2,000 years of theology.
Vastly different. In fact, that would be a wonderful social experiment for somebody who just independently reads the Bible and you ask them what their interpretation of it is.
Let's grab a member of the Praha tribe, set them aside, like, here's this book, read it, tell us what you think. And if they actually would I think it's legit, and then hear what they have to say, I doubt anyone would come up with the Trinity just reading the Bible cover to cover.
I don't think so.
You've got to be taught that because it's just in there.
Yeah, no, I'm following now. I've not. It took me a minute to not have any theological views to pick it up because I've picked it up recently and read through it. And Floyd and I have just argued over the first couple passages in Genesis, first couple chapters.
Why did God
what I read without a theology compared to what any theological views he can come up with of it? None of them match up. So
I was like, why? For people who are inerrantists, like, why did God want us to spend so much time reading genealogies? Like, yes, Joe, so and so begat so and so begat so. Do we really need to know this, Lord? I mean,
well, that's a perfect example.
Stretching imagination here.
That's a perfect example where people will say, well, God has his reasons, okay? Yeah, but what are his reasons? We don't know. Okay, so now you're free to make up whatever reasons you want, and that's exactly what happens. The problem with this kind of theology based on the book is that it's just armchair psychoanalysis, right? People are just trying to psychoanalyze God and figure out what does he want, what is his meaning, what is his purpose, what does he want me to glean from this, right? That's what they're doing, right? And it's unprincipled, and so long as people are allowed to say, well, he has his reasons and they're inscrutable, we don't know, then anything goes. They can say anything, but the problem with that is that I have no reason now to believe any particular thing that you say that would seem to make sense, because you're positing an alien mind, right? You're positing a being that has interests and values and knowledge and understanding so far beyond anything like us that I can't trust anything that you might normally infer from this. I look at the text and I go, well, judging on this, I would guess that God has this kind of character. Well, I mean, given that he's so other, so different, who the hell knows what this signifies? I mean, if it was like a human mind, I would know what I would infer. Right? I mean, I read the Old Testament. And, wait, let me just finish. I read the Old Testament, and I read the story of Noah's Ark and things like that, and this is a petulant Zeus-like God, right? I read the story of the fall in the Garden of Eden, and I see this God, Zeus-like God, terrified of usurpation, right? Who has to expel and punish his creation because they dared to know as much as he. Right, in that story, or the Tower of Babel and stuff like that. I mean, so I think I'm at liberty to do that, but they'll say, no, he's not like that. His nature is completely other. Well, wait, but if I'm supposed to infer his nature and psychology from the book, I got news for you. I see a very Zeus-like God in these early books, right? Nothing like the God that you're imagining. The only way you can sort of interpret that God isn't like that is if you ignore that and you ignore how minds ordinarily work, and you imagine a different kind of mind. But if he's got a completely different kind of mind than ours, then I can't infer any bloody thing. Stop pretending that you can confidently infer things from this text about God's nature. You can't.
Here's how I hear that explained a lot, is that just like I can infer your nature from talking to you, God talks to me through the book, so I can infer his nature.
Yeah, I wanted to mention something, but I think Ludic wanted to say something.
It was nothing in particular. It just seemed to me that the act of doing what Ozzy's saying and ultimately throws out the ability to falsify any of the claims made after you've made that leap, right? Like, you no longer have any avenues to, it's a Russell's teapot and it's nonsensical and you can come up with anything, really.
Yeah, I wanted to do a quick segue to talk about something we normally. This is obviously I'm not in the logic only zone community, but the one we normally are a part of. Welcome to ours, by the way, Logic.
Oh yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, we've often scoffed at this, but I want to take it seriously for a moment. That is the idea that to understand God, you have to look at it, use analogical language. That you can only understand God through analogy. I know Ozzy already like eyes roll. I want to take it seriously for a moment. What the thing is that well, God loves, but doesn't love the way you love. It's very different. But isn't that the same as saying that He doesn't love? That you would need a new word that doesn't make any sense. Like, because there is no essence of love, just like there's no essence of jealousy. God is jealous, but not the way you're jealous. Well, there'd have to be some kind of essence of jealousy for that to make any sense. I don't think there is. So what they're saying is, well, He's not jealous. He doesn't love. It's completely foreign to you. So what's the point of you in using the word?
I don't remember the where it's at in the Bible, but there is a passage that contradicts most of the Bible where it says, "Do not," something to the effect that "do not pretend to know the mind of God, for the mind of God is not that of men." And so it tells you right in, and I don't know if it's New Testament or Old Testament. I'd have to look it up, but it tells you that His mind is not like
His ways is not our ways.
Right, and then in the same context or whatever, we're created in His image. So now we have to read into like, well, how are we created in His image? Is that purely a physical sense, or are we created in the image of His mind or His thoughts? Because it says that we're not. You know what I'm saying? So you have the inconsistencies there. And that's the biggest problem I have with any of that, is that it is inconsistent, and all the messages, all of the lessons are really inconsistent if you take them back to back. But it does say in there that His mind is not like ours. I forget the actual wording, but it's something like "do not pretend to know the mind of God," something like that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the examples of how modern theology doesn't represent the context of what they thought when it was written. Yeah, I think it's clear. Well, it's clear to me at least that when they said in our image, they were thinking of like a body, like He looked like us, like Ozzy put, like a Zeus-like God, something kind of somewhat anthropomorphic. I think that's probably what was originally intended.
But now, of course, He walks through the garden with them.
Exactly. But now that we know more, and that no longer really fits with our understanding of how the world works, it's now changed to be, our spirit or something. It's the fact that it's evolved so much is another reason to suspect it.
Real quick on your analogical language point, JD, is that if it says, well, God loves so-and-so or whatever, or X, that if this was analogical language, this would mean that He loves the way we love, how we describe love. But that's whenever they don't accept that and go to, well, His love it could be different. It could be different than ours. So the analogy falls apart, like it dissolves. If God's ways are different than our ways.
Yeah, God feels something for us, but it's not. We call it love because it somehow is the closest thing to what He feels, but it's not love, whatever He feels. Right? We're just calling it love in scare quotes, right? So that's what I'd like. I would like all those words to have scare quotes in the Bible. Every attribute of God, everything that's said about God, I'd like to see it in scare quotes if you're going to use analogical reasoning.
Yeah,
to remind us that in fact it's love. God loves us. God is love. Right? Great. Now I'm happy. Now I understand.
That's kind of the only way you can get genocidal actions to somehow be loving is to put it in scare quotes. I've never I love you, but that's why I'm having you guys wipe out this village. Well, did you love the village? Oh no, I love them too. Wait, hold on, what? Do you mean something other than what I mean?
Yeah, I love my ant farm so much I flushed it all down the toilet. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, we even have passages in the New Testament that says, that Jesus says, you should love each other as I have loved you. So, and what does it mean to be made in God's own image? We have the same rational capacities, the same ability to reason and have intellect and be moral like God, but yeah, all that gets thrown out with this analogical language nonsense. But there is a theological view of what it means for God to be holy is that He is wholly other, that he is totally separate from His creation.
Like WHOLY, like wholly other.
Yeah. And that's kind of idea of ritual purification in the temple period, where you had to be ritually pure to be in the presence of God, to be in the temple. So, in some cases, a woman was ritually impure if she was menstruating, or she was ritually impure 40 days after giving birth to a male, and so forth. And you had to go through certain rituals and sacrifices to be made ritually pure again, and so forth. But but the view is that God is wholly other than His creation, and thus can't be compared to us. But then again, we hear verses of we're made in His image and we're to love each other as God has loved us and Jesus has loved us, and so forth. So it is very seems to be very contradictory.
So guys, I wanted to add, based on everything that's been said, I think that reason, although it is an amazing tool for comprehending truth, I think that it's not the only thing. I think it has a limit, especially for a lot of people who can't use reason. A large majority of the people in the world are incapable of accessing reason as a tool. So no matter what, in explaining truth or understanding what truth is, there has to be also another way. There has to be something subjective as well. And maybe a religion is an attempt at this, trying to explain some truth through subjective mannerisms, like metaphors and things like that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things too that okay. See, the thing is that any thought of God, God is an interpretation to begin with, right? It's an impure concept. It's not formed, right? It means different things to different people, right? And then the idea of trying to prove if somebody else's experience is not spiritual or not God, or they didn't talk to an angel or whatever, is kind of hard to do, because they can always say, we could always take the presupposition away that God is a singular being, right? It could be singular in the sense of how we view it or whatever, but maybe it has the power to be spontaneous or simultaneous, right? In different places at once. And this was, in The Watchmen, they had a lot of stuff on the character of Dr. Manhattan, where they covered a lot of that, right? The idea that they were talking in one spot about how he could prevent a nuclear war by stopping all the missiles at once, because he could split himself into different entities, right? And he said, well, even I can't do that, because he had a limit, right? So then if you assume that God has these abilities, that there is a God, and that he has these abilities to be simultaneous and all this other stuff, it's is there a limit to that? Is it infinite or whatever? So I think with the idea that, when you always hear about God being all-powerful, obviously he isn't, by the other stories and writings in there, because it seems like no matter what God does, he always fails, right? When it comes to trying to get people to do what he wants them to do, and then a flood comes or something else comes. So I just think there's too many inconsistencies to rely on any Bible, right? And there's too many political interests that are in control of what's written, right? So you could have a personal belief in a God or deity or whatever, but then you almost have to throw out every written text that would possibly support that, right? To have any consistent belief. I mean, I don't believe in it, but
Right.
that's all I had, But I mean, I don't believe in it, but I think if we're really going to tear it apart, you have to take the concept of God itself apart from the Bible, apart from everything else, and say, okay, well, what are the limitations to a God? What are there minimum requirements to what would be considered a God, right? You know,
right. No, yeah, that's where I start. Is can a God possibly exist? Any God, can it possibly exist? And then move from there. And then if it can possibly exist, what good reason do I have to believe it actually exists?
Yeah, that I think is a way better and more interesting question. Like, just speaking as an atheist, I think what's more interesting is sort of a concept of a God as just a simple creator, right? A being not of this world, but that created this world, and therefore can't be of this world, and isn't identical with this world, right? You know, so
up to this.
Oh, did we just lose somebody, or did I freeze?
I think he locked up.
Oh, okay, locked up.
Oh, there he goes.
Oh, so I think that's a more interesting question, you know, as an atheist. The idea of a creator of the physical reality that we see around us, right? That I think is a more entertaining and challenging prospect than something like Christianity. I mean, Christianity, I see it as just a falsified religion. It's just this, you know, archaic thing that just doesn't make any sense. It's falsified in just a bazillion different ways in history and archaeology, cosmology, evolution. It's just like the whole thing doesn't make sense. Philosophically, it doesn't make sense. It's just, you know, a holdover from a more primitive way of thinking that we would never come up with today in light of what we know, right? That religion simply would not arise today. But you know, there's certain conceptions of deism that I think are more fun to sort of wrestle with and tangle with. Unfortunately, there are very few deists to talk to and argue with, and people of that view. And then there are pantheists and panentheists and stuff like that. But we don't find too many of them. And I think a lot of atheists are motivated to argue only with creationists because, of course, creationists have a tendency to, you know, they want creationism taught in schools and stuff like that, and they have anti-scientific views and stuff like that. So there are good political reasons to be concerned with them, right? But philosophically, just from the standpoint of just trying to understand, you know, all of reality, I like entertaining this larger possibility that the world around us is an artifact, is a creation. And try to compare that against other theories of what the world around us is. I mean, because if it's not a creation, what is it, and how did it come about, right? Or did it come about, or has it always been around in some different form, right? So that to me is a more interesting question. If you guys ever want to do a hangout about that question, I'd love to.
I'll definitely do that this week. I think I kind of touched on deism a bit. I think I have some facets of deism in my perspectives.
Okay.
Yeah,
I have to go. I want to thank you. It's the first time I've seen your hangout and enjoying it. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for coming. It was awesome having you.
My pleasure.
Yeah,
Good night,
thanks.
Bye, Ozzy.
Bye.
Thanks, Ozzy. Have a good night.
Oh, finally that asshole left. Jeez, he's annoying.
Now we can really talk about the subjects in depth. Okay, we keep on having to explain stuff to Ozzy all the time. It gets, you know.
Okay,
yeah, we
guys.
Just so you know, I think most of us are starting to wind down. Like I've heard in the side chat, I've seen a few of them that people are going to have to go to get offline here soon.
Yeah, so we're in open discussion, so you guys can talk about anything you'd like. I've about hit my time limit, but I can stick around a little bit or leave this going if you guys want to talk.
Awesome.
I gotta save stuff for Tuesday.
Yeah, you could take it off. I'm gonna probably take off here soon too. I told you I was gonna be here at some point. I was a little late, but yeah, great show, man. It was really interesting.
Great show.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna get going too. But yeah, thank you for inviting me, and
Yeah.
it was a very good chat.
Yeah, and we do this every week, and I try to think of new and unique topics to talk about. Yeah.
Well, if you ever feel like having a less cordial discussion, you know my Tuesday show now, so feel free to stop by.
I'll try to catch it. I get off work right like halfway through your show, so I'm gonna try.
Yeah,
but,
7 p.m. Eastern, Tuesday. I used to get screwed up, you know, like, oh well, stuff's going on. It's gonna be Wednesday this time, but I've been pretty good the last dozen or so episodes, right on time. In fact, people
on the
kind of joke about the
channel,
chat.
right?
People like talking before the show started. I'm like, all right, enough. 7 on the dot. Here we go.
It's on your channel as your name appears on the banner, right? JD Kane.
Oh yeah, thanks for hosting this. It was fun.
Yeah, and I love doing this. So you know, it's great. Most of the people here are new, and I really appreciate all you guys coming and talking. Something that's great is every week there's different types of people on the show, and so we get a really mix. We get a lot of different personality types and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I gotta say, if take advantage of Ozzy, he's a wonderful resource for, I should say, patching up some bad non-atheist arguments. I used to use quite a few, and I was happy to have it explain to me exactly why I should stop doing that. I was a lacktheist for at least a year. Like, oh no, I lack a belief. It's totally different to say I don't believe in God than I believe God doesn't exist. And I finally had to have it explained to me. No, that's really stupid. You should stop. Now I give that explanation to other people, and I hear the same things I was saying.
Right.
No, it's really different. I just can't really explain why.
Wait till you get into the semantic arguments where someone doesn't want to, they want to say that, like with bionic dance, thing like that. Wait till you get more of those. I still more of those than anything.
Yeah, I still got
who
people
has the right definition. You're saying my definition's wrong? Like, no. Say, make your definition all you want. Just know that that's not a common usage, and you're gonna have to explain yourself. Like,
yeah.
The situation is no definition of that situation is right or wrong. Which one I just think is which one's better, more useful. That's it. I mean, if someone wants to go with the lacktheist definition, I'm fine with it, but I'm not saying they're absolutely wrong. I just think I think there's better definitions out there, and when they say that my definition is wrong, the one that I use with it, like Ozzy uses, then they're like, well, you're just being an idiot. The only definition out there is lacktheism. And I'm like, no, that's actually the smaller position, you know?
It's actually they pull a fallacy, the genetic fallacy. When you say, well, it meant this when it was devised, it has to mean that now. That has nothing to do with usage or anything. That's pulling on its genetics to say that it's true because of that. And
well, so many atheists. So many atheists are so just terribly skeptical of anything having to do with philosophy. They're just so used to hearing, the Kalam cosmological argument and other theistic arguments, and they know they're wrong, but they can't explain it, and they get mocked for it, and they start becoming just really like, I really hate philosophy, and they're like, I'm a lacktheist. Oh no, well the philosophers have said. I don't care what the philosophers have said, and they go that way, not realizing that when you crunch the numbers, when you look up the reports, 70% of philosophers are atheists, and not lacktheists. Gods aren't a thing. We're in a godless universe. Pretty sure of it.
Heretics.
And some are like, moral anti-realism is great. I don't have to talk about morals anymore. I just say there are no moral facts. And then, actually, of that 70%, about 70% are moral realists. So you got some more.
That's because philosophers are religious. It's religion.
Yeah.
I think people went to lacktheism just because, like you said, they didn't know a lot about philosophy, and to take a lacktheist approach, they think it somehow just alleviates their having to have a burden of justification or anything like that, because they're just saying, well, I'm not asserting God doesn't exist. I'm not saying I don't believe God exists. I'm just saying that I lack a belief, and I'm like, that's a little weaselly to me.
It's a defense reaction too, because I know in the early days. Any number of times, so like, well, do you believe gods don't exist? And the first time they said yes, they went, oh, you have the burden of proof. You made a positive assertion. I'm not going to say another claim until you discharge the burden.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. That's why I made my video on burden of proof, because people are afraid of saying anything in this community anymore because somebody's going to attack them and say, you have the burden of proof now, and let's not get anywhere in the discussion until you get burden of proof is just discharged, like you said. I'm like, that doesn't really get us anywhere. People can say things in colloquial speak, and again, like if I say evolution is true, or evolution theory describes reality, I'm not going to sit there and go through every single piece of evidence to show why that is the fact, right? I'm just like this basically accept the fact.
I don't need to hear all the views. I don't need to hear all the wrong views. It's like I want to hear the right view, so we don't have to sit here and argue each single point a little every time.
I gotta say, nowadays I'm glad when they pull that card. You have the burden. I'm like, cool. Let's talk about divine hiddenness. And they're like, oh, that's one of the good ones, isn't it? You don't know anything. You don't have the Holy Spirit. they'll start throwing out thought terminating cliches, just trying to get out of it.
I'm surprised a theist even lets you in their hangs anymore, DD. I think you're banned.
Oh, what are you talking about? Well, that was actually kind of fun. The other day I was in with MK, and yeah, he was actually kind of pleasant to talk to for a little bit. I mean, he's wrong enough on the way, but he's trying. He really seems like he's trying.
He's getting better.
He's trying.
He's an honest guy. That's the weird thing.
Well, he did a fair hang with Floyd the other day. I think he did well.
It's why his presup is so bad. He's honest. Presuppositional arguments are not honest. When it comes down to it, he's like one of the few people I've heard who's tried to present it honestly. Like, well, he's giving me this knowledge and it's certain. But he doesn't have any of the comebacks that you need, which have to misrepresent the opposition. He doesn't do the interrogation, so it never goes out well for him.
No, I like MK a lot. I was just talking to him a minute ago in an external chat.
Yeah, he's calmed down quite a bit, which is nice. He's starting to get over that.
Yeah, I've never had the crazy side of it come towards me, or necessarily been in a room when he's done it. I've seen the videos, but.
Well, I think he really wants to know truth. I think he really has a desire to really get to the heart of things and want to know truth. I just think the way he goes about it sometimes seems a little odd. But I think he's honest in his inquiry to really know things. And I can't fault him for that.
No, this happens when this happened almost to me when you start getting in and learning some of the philosophy and the basic stuff, is that you start hearing concepts like, well, I could be in a dream, right? I can't disprove I'm not in a dream. Well, yeah, I can't disprove I'm not in a dream. Maybe this is all a dream right now. So what? Right? Like I'm a brain in a vat. Maybe this could all be the Matrix.
So what?
Yes, that is possible. I can't disprove it.
Yeah.
What good reason do I have to think that that's actually the case? That's the step he misses.
This is one of the cases where Aaron Ra, I think, was on the right track. He says, whether I'm in the Matrix or not, this world seems to obey rules, and it's all I've got to work with.
Yeah.
So,
he's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is life, guys.
And that follows.
It's called a prima facie case, if anyone cares to look it up. You take things as they come. Do you have reason to doubt them, or reason to go against them?
I believe in the prima facie case, but I also accept pragmatism to a certain extent. Like if we are a brain in the vat, then it's not. We have no reason to think so. So I'm pragmatic about it. I just dismiss it, and that's pragmatism. That's it.
I had a lot of fun with MK because we were discussing. I'm not sure who brought up it, hard solipsism, and how do you know you're not a brain in a vat, that kind of stuff. And he did the bit where he's like, well, I know because God has made me certain of it. And I said, but couldn't God make you a brain in a vat to test you? And it didn't go much. I kept just every time he's like, oh no, because he's told me. It's like, maybe he sent Satan to tell you in his voice to test you another way. I mean, that's possible, right? He's tested people in the Bible. It didn't go very well from that point on. Like, oh crap, maybe I could be.
Well, that's like Simon saying I've solved hard solipsism because God, being an external mind, has told me there are external minds. It's like, what?
Yeah, I had to have an
assuming the problem solved before you start. You're not allowed to.
Yeah, it's like a little problem there.
Yeah, I had to assume.
There's other minds. Another mind talk to me.
I had to assume an external mind exists before I could solve the problem that only my mind exists.
Yeah, it's like, how do you know that mind wasn't your mind? Oh, well, because it was another mind? Crap. Yeah, there's no way to do it. Right. That's why you got to presuppose it.
And unless God's mind is your mind. But then we're back to metaphysical solipsism, not Christianity.
Well, yeah, I don't understand how the precept gets to Christianity either. I've never understood that part of it. But they, for some reason, they think that if you make these kind of basal assumptions that, you're wrong to do so. Oh, well, you're making these assumptions. Well, yeah, so what? There's nothing wrong with making assumptions.
You can't really help it, apparently, from what Ozzy says.
Yeah,
right.
We kind of all have axiomatic starting points. We can't do much about that.
Yeah, I missed part of what you're saying when I came in, but on properly basic beliefs, I don't know if you said it. They are articles of faith. They have no reason for you trusting your memory or buying into induction right. Yes, maybe you use them over because you think they've worked in the past. But when you just think of when you first used your memory, what did you rely on to trust your memory? The first time you ever used it, nothing. You had no reason for it. You totally took it on faith because these are the ingredients of rationality. It doesn't matter that they don't themselves have reasons except for circularity.
Yeah, I mean, there's just no way to prove P equals P. You just got to assume it.
And they're not just arbitrary. That was the big line he was trying to draw, and that's it.
Like you always say,
they aren't just arbitrary beliefs They have a filter to go through to become properly basic, and why these are accepted and why just anything else isn't.
But the argument is really sound that what is more properly basic than P equals P, and JD says, well, if you posited God to justify P equals P, you're positing something that's far less properly basic than something like P equals P, and that's where I get confused about how they think it makes sense.
I really like that argument. I'm pretty sure I didn't originate it, but I really
no, you're not smart enough to originate it.
No, never mind. I'm going to lay claim to this. A lot of people do non-contradiction. A lot of people do non-contradiction. I decided to go with identity. I think identity is simple. P equals P. That's the simplest of all three.
Yes, it
the
is.
other ones are slightly less simple, at least the appearance of it. So
Well, presuppers
law of
go at it
identity.
that they don't.
Who's going to say that God is simpler than P equals P?
No, they don't assume. That's what the presuppers know what they're saying. Won't say that they assume God, and then have properly basic beliefs, right? Like he's not there. He is the starting point, and then you assume things. He's the only reason you can assume things.
That's just an assertion, though.
I know.
It has no. It makes no sense whether you have that assertion or not, because we still. I mean, somebody who doesn't have belief or faith still has the same properly basic beliefs without God. They're just saying, oh well, yeah, you use the same properly basic beliefs I do, but I don't call them properly basic beliefs because God told me they're actually real. They're not properly basic. Well, so what? You're just asserting something, dude.
Well, you can't even have properly basic beliefs unless you take this my God worldview as necessary. You can't. You don't have the tools of intelligibility.
It's pretty
you
arrogant.
Have properly basic beliefs unless you assume my God first.
Yeah, well, Occam's razor does a great job on that. It's like, does the positing of God improve your understanding of the laws of the classical three principles of logic? Well, no. In that case, I can posit something equally superfluous to account for your accounting of the account. I mean, we can kick the can back to, well, there's this guy named, we'll call him Steve McRae, and he created God, and he's the one who accounts for the laws of logic because he accounts for God, who accounts for laws of logic. Why not?
But even if you had an account,
make shit up. You're gonna make if it doesn't add anything, then it's indistinguishable from something you invented.
That's it. Even though you have an accounting, what makes it? Just because you have an accounting doesn't mean your accounting is right.
It's not even an accounting.
It's a puzzle piece, but it doesn't mean it's the right puzzle piece.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing. It doesn't actually account for the classical principles of logic, other than to have the attribute of accounting for the three principles of logic. There's no explanation for how that works.
It's not required. Yeah, it's not required.
It doesn't tell you anything. It's
No,
not.
it's just by
I have
definition.
you can posit anything. You know. Well, people have said something similar about like you need to have personal. Like we're talking about the origin of the universe. The Kalam. It has to be a being. It has to be personal, etc. And Craig in particular goes through all the reasons why he thinks that's the case. I'm like, well, that's just way too far. All you need to posit is something with the attributes of being able to create universes. Oh, was that a God? No, it doesn't have to be a God. It doesn't have to be any number of things. It just has to have the attribute of being necessary for the creation of the universe. There, I've solved the problem.
Well, that's what I would call God, right? Like, it doesn't have to be a mind and all these things, but if it creates a universe, I would call it a God, just by virtue, just a definition. Doesn't have to have all these
but what if it is someone like
it?
us? What if we got advanced to the point where we figured out how to make something like us, like through a black hole or something?
We would be in that universe. People would call us God, and I think they would be fine calling us God. We wouldn't call ourselves.
It would be the creator, but think of how we think of gods versus what we really are.
Yeah,
we would really be gods.
I would be the God of that universe, right? Like I would call myself the God of that universe, the creator. Or I might not say God, but I would say I'm the creator of that universe.
You'd be a deist God, that's for sure. Like I can't even get involved. I'm still here.
Yeah, this would just be a deist God. That's I use that the simulated universe analogy as that what you said. We get so advanced, we create a Sims game that actually creates time and space and all these things that we're outside of. So we're supernatural and transcendent creator of that universe.
There's a cool short story by I can't remember his name. It has to do with the second law of thermodynamics. I have to look it up again. One of the famous names in science fiction.
I think we're gonna. Okay, I think we're gonna probably go off air pretty soon. Things are starting to wind down.
Yeah. And
thanks for having me, Logic. I gotta
your link's in the description.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. I hope to see you guys back.
Oh, I found it.
Probably not.
It's called The Last Question. I believe it's by Asimov.
Asimov.
And it's epic for a short story.
Hey, Logic, if you go off air, a few of us will still stick around. So if the link's in the description, anybody still watching can jump in and still talk off air.
Okay, guys.
I'm gonna get going though. Thanks again
Okay.
for.
All right, JD.
Good
Later,
night,
man.
JD.
Hope to join you in your hangout soon. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, I guess I'll just. Bye, guys.
Bye, Logic.
Later.
Yeah, take it easy for a second, but.
Have a great week, guys, and I'll see you next week at Logic Church, Sunday, 3 p.m. Pacific time. And hope you guys enjoyed the show and all that, and that's pretty much it. So, hasta luego.